Chapter 1661. At this moment, Mao Mu's words were filled with righteousness, causing Qian Sengbao's heart to surge. Indeed, Chao Jixiang was becoming more and more powerful, especially recently. Whenever he saw the emperor, even Qian Sengbao had to avoid him. This was not a good sign. If Qian Sengbao continued to develop, who knew if Qian Sengbao would replace him one day? If that was the case, then he would be completely finished. As a eunuch, he knew very well that if he continued to be an ordinary eunuch, perhaps no one would do anything to him. However, once he fell from a high position, it was impossible to even ask for a complete corpse. Of course, eunuchs were not complete people, let alone complete corpses. Cough, cough. Qian Sengbao, who had been thinking about how to break out of this situation, did not expect Mao Mu to jump out. Although the two of them were not very close, the key was that Qian Sengbao's rank was high enough. He did not need to do much about this matter. He only needed to report it to the emperor and record it in the records. With the face of the 50,000 taels of silver and the ability to make Chao Jixiang unhappy, why would he be happy to do such a thing? The more he thought about it, the more advantageous it was for him. Looking at Mao Mu's expectant expression, Qian Sengbao finally made a decision. All right, I'll mention this matter to the emperor tomorrow morning. Eunuch Mao, don't worry. Thank you for your guidance, Eunuch Qian. Mao Mu bowed like a subordinate. This made Qian Sengbao even more satisfied. The matter went very smoothly. Zhu Qijin, who had rested at the empress's place for the night, woke up glowing in the morning. Using this opportunity, Qian Sengbao proposed to let eunuch Mao Mu take on the position of vice supervisor of the embroidered uniform guard. This is something that you, the head eunuch, should worry about. Just do what you think is feasible. Zhu Qijin said casually. It was true that he relied on Chao Jixiang, but he had to be careful. Arranging a vice supervisor for them was a good way to keep them in check, especially this time, when Chao Jixiang had made a great contribution. It was even more important to keep them in check. He knew Mao Mu was very obedient. Empress Qian had praised him more than once. Moreover, he was an old man who had followed them from Baiming's capital, so he was most likely loyal. It had to be said that Zhu Qijin's manipulation of power was quite good. Moreover, he had always had a good impression of eunuchs. Now that Qian Sengbao had taken the initiative to suggest it, he agreed. Thus, Mao Mu took up the post. Yangxia had already begun to transport all sorts of war resources from Crimson City to Laizhou, prefecture of Guangdong province. The war was in the midst of preparations, and it seemed like it would erupt at any moment. Mao Mu's actions had to be faster. After receiving the appointment decree from Monk Qian Bao, Mao Mu went to the embroidered uniform guard to take up his post. Mao Mu took the imperial edict to the embroidered uniform guard. All the important figures in the family, as well as some Qianhu and Vice Jinhu, came out to greet the imperial edict. But when they found out that Mao Mu was going to be the deputy factory manager, the faces of the people who came to welcome them immediately fell. The entire welcome hall was quickly emptied, leaving only a deputy Qianhu named Wu Ben standing there. Mao Mu was not surprised that everyone had left because he already knew the current power structure of the embroidered uniform guard. The embroidered uniform guard commander Chao Zhang, Chao Jixiang's younger brother, was primary third rank. Commander Chao Yan, Chao Jixiang's nephew, was secondary third rank. Commander Chao Xian, Chao Jixiang's adopted son, was primary fourth rank. Commander Wen Jing, Chao Jixiang's trusted aide, was primary fourth rank. Guardian Chao Duo, Chao Jixiang's adopted son, was secondary fourth rank. Guardian Su Hui, Chao Jixiang's trusted aide, was secondary fourth rank, etc. All of these people had a very close relationship with Chao Jixiang. Mao Mu had already understood the situation before he came here. He didn't expect these people to have a better attitude towards him. However, there was still one person who had not left. This was outside of his expectations. Although it was only a deputy Qianhu, it was still very pleasing. "You are Wu Ben." Mao Mu smiled as he looked at the only person who had not left and sat down on the main seat. Wu Ben noticed that Mao Mu was sitting on the main seat. That was the seat that only Chao Jixiang could sit on in the past. Even when Chao Jixiang was not present, his younger brother, the current commander Chao Zhang, did not dare to sit there. But now Mao Mu sat on that seat naturally. Needless to say, his ambition was obvious. Seeing the scene, Wu Ben was even more determined to join Chao Jixiang. It was not for anything else, but because he had unintentionally offended Qianhu Chao Duo. This was Chao Jixiang's adopted son. Now he was just waiting for Chao Jixiang to come back and deal with him. He had no other choice but to turn to any doctor in his desperation. Mao Mu was his life's hope. Other than relying on him, he had no other choice but to treat a dead horse as a living horse. So when Mao Mu asked, he did not stand and simply knelt on the ground. "This little one is Deputy Qianhu Wu Ben. In the future, I am willing to serve Lord Mao." How could Mao Mu not know what he was thinking when he knelt in front of him? There was no need to guess the process. Presumably, he had offended someone in the Chao family, so he had to do this. Wasn't this what he wanted? Previously, he had been worried that there was no one by his side that he could use and needed to be promoted. Now that Wu Ben had taken the initiative to join him, it was a pleasant surprise. He had already decided to accept the other party, but before that, he still needed to understand the situation clearly. At least, he had to know what was going on. "Speak, who did you offend?" "Don't worry, just speak frankly. If there are any lies, I can't help you." Mao Mu's bluntness made Wu Ben see hope. In any case, there was no other way. Since Mao Mu was his only chance, he told Chao Jixiang about his dispute with Chao Duo. Speaking of which, it was just for a woman. Here, the embroidered uniform guard was not completely the same as eunuchs. Apart from the embroidered uniform guards, Qianhu master being eunuch, there was no rule that stipulated that the officials below had to be eunuchs. So many people were still able-bodied men. Wu Ben was one of them. Not only that, he also had a family and a woman called Xiao Chui. Unexpectedly, because of Xiao Chui's beauty, she actually attracted Chao Duo's attention, and then he wanted to snatch her away. Just like that, a very melodramatic thing happened. As a man, Wu Ben naturally wouldn't agree. He also relied on his identity as a vice Qianhu to beg for some face in front of Chao Duo. Unexpectedly, it didn't work at all, and he even offended the other party. Chao Duo threatened that when his adoptive father, Chao Jixiang, returned, he would snatch Xiao Chui to his residence and teach him a lesson. The so-called lesson was naturally to teach him a lesson. For the embroidered uniform guard, there weren't too many reasons to teach someone a lesson. From then on, Wu Ben lived in the shadows. For 3 consecutive days, he even thought of committing suicide. But when he thought that even if he died, he wouldn't be able to solve Xiao Chui's problem, he could only give up on the idea. He originally thought that there wouldn't be any way to break out of this situation. At this time, Mao Mu appeared. Of course, he would be held in his hands like a life-saving straw. One wanted to accept people, and the other wanted to seek refuge. This was 2 good things, 1 good thing. Immediately, Mao Mu helped Wu Ben up with a courteous appearance and asked about the other party's situation. Wu Ben's ancestral home was Jinhua Zhejiang. His ancestors had once opened an escort agency. Since young, he had learned extraordinary martial arts. Later on, his family declined, and he joined the embroidered uniform guard. He had been a small banner, a general, a baihu, and the current vice Jinhu. But if he wanted to continue to be promoted and become one of the 14 Jinhu, it would be even more difficult. That required Chao Jixiang's approval. Unfortunately, he had no connections and no money to show filial piety. Now that he had offended Chao Duo, it would be difficult for him to keep his life, let alone be promoted. The embroidered uniform guard was an organization that was above the law. When they killed people, they didn't need any reason at all. As the vice Jinhu of the embroidered uniform guard, Wu Ben knew this better than outsiders. Hearing Wu Ben say this, Mao Mu was very satisfied. He couldn't help but ask, "Oh, so your martial arts are not bad. But compared to the other Qianhu, who is stronger and who is weaker?" At this moment, Wu Ben, who saw Mao Mu as his savior, didn't dare to boast. But on this matter, he couldn't help but express his opinion. The so-called Qianhu are only people that Chao Jixiang trusts or people who give him large amounts of money. In terms of ability, there aren't many who know martial arts. In terms of fighting, they are completely not his opponent. As if afraid that Mao Mu wouldn't believe him, Wu Ben said, "In reality, the people who really do things in the embroidered uniform guard are not commanders, or Qianhu. Basically, they are all people below the vice Qianhu rank, especially the general and small banners." Mao Mu also knew this. In the embroidered uniform guard, the small banners were in charge of 10 people, the general banners were in charge of 5 small banners, the Baihu were in charge of 2 general banners, and the Qianhu were in charge of 10 Baihu. According to the Ming dynasty, the embroidered uniform guard was an independent guard office with a total of 5,600 people. A Qianhu had 1,120 people, and a Baihu had 112 people. This was the standard. But, in reality, the number of people depended on the embroidered uniform guard's ability. In the mid to late Ming dynasty, because there was no upper limit to the number of people in the embroidered uniform guard, the total number of people increased to around 60,000 to 100,000. The current embroidered uniform guard, under Chao Jixiang's leadership, had developed in a somewhat abnormal direction. The number of people had long since exceeded 10,000, which was more than twice the number set by the court. This gave Mao Mu more space to show off. If there were fewer people, it would be difficult to do anything big. Wu Ben's explanation gave Mao Mu a better understanding of the current embroidered uniform guard. He had already decided to accept Wu Ben as a person. First of all, this was the first person to rely on him, and it had to have a publicity effect. Second of all, this person was indeed a talent. In addition, he had already offended the Chao family, so he could use him without worry. But just relying on this person was definitely not enough. Mao Mu already had an idea, so he had Wu Ben follow him to the embroidered uniform guard's discipline prison. He wanted to go there to find someone useful. Chapter 1662. The so-called discipline prison of the embroidered uniform guard was the prison of the embroidered uniform guard. Most of the people locked up there were important criminals of the embroidered uniform guard and some embroidered uniform guards who had made mistakes. The most reliable people were naturally the criminals of the embroidered uniform guard who had been dealt with by the Chao family. If they were of one mind, they would not have been caught here. It had to be said that Mao Mu's train of thought was very correct. When he took the vice director's token and arrived at the discipline prison without any obstructions, as expected, he saw many brothers of the embroidered uniform guard who were imprisoned here because of their various mistakes. Some of these people had really made mistakes, especially those who had violated the embroidered uniform guard's own rules and were locked up here. For example, they had bullied the good, oppressed the officials, corrupted, and so on. However, there were also some who were not wrong. They were just thrown here because they had offended the Chao family. Most of these people were capable and opinionated. Chao Jixiang had no intention of beating these people to death with a stick. He told them to find their families to ransom them. If they did not have any money, then they could only wait to be tortured to death. These people were the people Mao Mu was looking for. Xin Nantang, a local of Nanjing, was originally 100 households. However, because he was soft-hearted and let go of the 2-year-old granddaughter of a criminal, he was caught here and punished according to the family's internal rules. The ransom was 200 taels. Speaking of this, it had to be said that Zhu Yuanzhang had set a set of salary standards in the 25th year of Hongwu. He had also stipulated that the salary would not change for the next 200 years of the Ming dynasty. In other words, no matter how much the price of goods outside increased, the salary would still be the same. The officials of the great Ming dynasty were a bit better. They basically had some gray income. However, the people below them were sad. For example, 100 households like Shan Nantang only had a salary of 5 taels a month. This was because he had an official position, which was at least a 6th-rank official. Moreover, the ransom of 200 taels was equivalent to him not eating or drinking for 3 years. How could he possibly have the money to do so? He could only be locked up here. One could even imagine that if it wasn't for Mao Mu's appearance, he would probably never have appeared until one day when he died in it. Since Mao Mu had appeared, Shin Nantang could naturally be saved. According to Wu Ben's explanation, this person's martial arts were not ordinary. He was also very famous in the entire embroidered uniform guards. He was even one of the top 5. If not for that, he would have been killed a long time ago for releasing the daughter of a serious criminal. Chao Jixiang was also a person who valued talent, which was why he wanted the ransom. Mao Mu naturally had to extend a helping hand to such a person. She had a conscience, and she had been played so badly by Chao Jixiang. If he didn't save her, who would? It was only 200 taels of silver. He took it out without any hesitation. Then he named a few more people and recorded their ransom. Then he asked Wu Ben to handle the procedures for them. Mao Mu wanted the prisoners and paid the ransom according to the rules. So the brocade guard official in charge of the disciplined prison could only release the prisoners. In this way, a team was quickly formed. Besides Wu Ben, Mao Mu also had Shin Nantang, Luo Zhu, and a series of capable generals. After leaving the disciplined prison, Mao Mu did not let them go home immediately. Instead, he first took them to an enormous restaurant in the Yingtian prefecture. First, he washed everyone, then gave each of them 100 taels of silver as a meeting gift. This was still not shocking. What was even more shocking was that Mao Mu proposed in front of everyone that he would make adjustments within the embroidered uniform guards. Wu Ben and Shin Nantang would become the new Qinhu. Luo Zhu and the others would also become Baihu or Test Baihu. Not only did he give out money, but he also conferred official positions. Immediately, everyone expressed their gratitude. They were all people who had been pushed aside. They had the ability, but other than that, they had no money and no backing. They had never thought that one day they would have a meteoric rise. Mao Mu's arrival made many of their wishes come true. In the time it took to eat a meal, he became the true master in everyone's eyes. Seeing everyone's urgent gaze on him, Mao Mu naturally felt a sense of heroism from the bottom of his heart. Although he was no longer a healthy man, he had his own dreams and his own idols. For example, his goal was the 3 treasures eunuch, Zheng He. That was definitely a legendary existence among the eunuchs. If he wanted to be like Zheng He had to fulfill 2 conditions. First, he had to obtain the emperor's trust. Right now, he had obtained Yang Qindong's deep trust, so he had fulfilled this condition. Second, he had to have the ability. If he could grasp the power of the embroidered uniform guards in his hands, wouldn't that prove it? Mao Mu, who had his own ideals, fully displayed the smooth side of a eunuch at the table. And everyone was excited because they had a new backing and a new goal. Everyone was a frustrated person. Most of them had even been waiting for death in the prison. Now they could eat and drink here. Moreover, they had been told that a career and wealth were right in front of them. How could they not be excited? Even if Mao Mu wanted them to deal with the Chao family, no one would have any objections. Mao Mu cleverly did not give any orders to them, nor did he say that his backing was Yang Qindong. Everyone still had doubts about his ability and whether he could help them get promoted and seize power. He needed to settle the matter of the officials first. After eating and drinking to their fill, everyone left with a satisfied expression and returned to their homes. Now that they had money, they should buy some things for their homes and make some changes. Mao Mu also returned to the palace. He first went to the Empress Place to take a roll call. Seeing that there was nothing for him to do, he directly went to find Qian Xingbao. Ever since he received the 50,000 taels of silver from Mao Mu, the relationship between the two had become much closer. When he heard that Mao Mu wanted to see him, he naturally opened the door to welcome him. As expected, this time he still sent money. Although it was not much, 15,000 taels of silver still made Qian Singbao beam with joy. Qian Singbao, the 10,000 taels of silver were given by Wu Ben and Xin Nantang. One of them is a vice Qianhu, the other is a baihu. They have enough qualifications. When they saw me, they asked if they could spend money to get promoted. I thought about it and thought that all the benefits could not be taken by Chao Jixiang, so I made the decision to agree for Qian Singbao. There are also a few more, but they are all for Baihu and Zongqi. They are all very low-ranking officials. What do you think? Qian Singbao had already taken the banknotes. He asked curiously, "Are all the servants of the embroidered uniform guard so rich?" Yes, I didn't know before. It can be seen how much money Chao Jixiang has pocketed. That's right, there are some officials below who also want to work for Qian Singbao. They all waved banknotes to me, but I don't know if there will be such a thing in the future. When Mao Mu saw Qian Singbao put away the banknotes, he knew that the matter of the two Qianhu had been settled. However, if he wanted to control the entire embroidered uniform guard, these two Qianhu were far from enough. Therefore, for the sake of a long term, he asked tentatively, "There are still people who want to buy officials?" At this moment, Qian Sengbao's face also turned red. He suddenly realized that this was a good way to accumulate wealth. He thought that he was smart, but he was actually so stupid. He did not know that the embroidered uniform guard had such a big profit. It seemed that he was still a little short-sighted. In the past, when he saw that the emperor would let the embroidered uniform guard do something difficult, he thought that it was a hot potato. Now it seemed that he was wrong. That's right. Not only do they want to buy Qianhu, if possible, they are also willing to pay money to buy the position of town supervisor, or even the position of advisor and advisor. You see, as Mao Mu spoke, he carefully observed the changes in Qian Sengbao's expression. Do they have that much silver? Qian Singbao asked with even more surprise. Yes, this servant has asked. If Duke Qian agrees, a town supervisor will be 20,000 taels of silver. Advisor will be 50,000 taels of silver, and advisor will be 100,000 taels of silver. Of course, a commander will be a little higher, 500,000 taels of silver. Mao Mu was still talking, but when Qian Singbao heard 500,000 taels of silver, his eyes were already wide open. One had to know that after being the head eunuch for so many years, he had only saved 200,000 to 300,000 taels of silver. There was nothing he could do about it. With his position, there were too many people looking at him. If he wanted them to listen to him, he would have to give them some benefits. In the past year, just the benefits he gave to the servants were already a huge expense. In a year, he would only get 20,000 to 30,000 taels of silver. Sometimes, when the emperor had some festive occasion, he would even have to send gifts. Once he received tens of thousands of taels of silver, after working hard for a year, he would spend all the gifts in one go. Now, Mao Mu had found a way for him to make money. He did a rough calculation. If he sold all these positions, he would probably get close to 1,000,000 taels of silver. This was something he never dared to think about. Just as Qian Singbao was calculating in his heart, Mao Mu spoke again. "Duke Qian, this servant has thought about it. We can repeatedly earn this money. For example, whoever buys an advisor position will have to pay 100,000 taels of silver. After taking the position, they will have to pay 10,000 taels of silver every month. For example, the advisor position is 50,000 taels of silver, so they have to pay 5,000 taels of silver every month. As for the commander's 500,000 taels, he would have to pay 50,000 taels a month. If they can continue to pay, they can continue to be officials. If they can't pay, they will owe at most a month before being removed from their position. In this way, we can earn a large amount of money every month. Doesn't this mean that we will get close to 100,000 taels of silver every month?" Qian Singbao was really frightened. What was the difference between this and robbery? But would these people agree? Would they be able to earn so much money every month? Seeing Qian Sengbao's shocked expression, Mao Mu felt disdain in her heart. It was only a small amount of money, and he was already frightened. One had to know that Yang Qindong gave out 1,000,000 taels of silver every time. If it wasn't enough, he could ask for more. How bold was that? Moreover, this money was not a loss because once the southern Ming Empire was annexed, this money would eventually return to Yang Xie's pocket. Right now, it was just temporarily placed here. Chapter 1663. Naturally, these thoughts would not be spoken out loud. Mao Mu continued, "This servant has also asked about this. They also said that as long as they are given power, they will think of a way to get the money. For example, there are so many corrupt officials in our court, and so many people who do business with Yang Xie in private. Those are all very profitable businesses. As long as they are dealt with, the money will be sent to you every month. There won't be any problems." Qian Xingbao was afraid that these people would act recklessly after gaining power. Once they made the emperor unhappy, it would be a big matter. Now that he heard that it was actually against the corrupt officials and the merchants who did business with Yang Xi, he felt a lot more relieved. Good, that's good. Seeing that Qian Xingbao had agreed, Mao Mu struck while the iron was hot. Since that's the case, does Qian need to meet them? Well, I'll leave everything to eunuch Mao. This duke is relieved. Qian Xingbao thought about it and decided not to meet them. This way, if something were to happen, he could still shirk responsibility, but if he met them, some things were really hard to explain. This was also what Mao Mu wanted. Since that's the case, this servant will wait. I'm sure that after receiving the money, these people will thank Qian Xingbao. By the way, what rank can this official be sold to? There's no rush. Let's deal with the two Qianhu first and see their reaction. Qian Xingbao didn't know that something had happened to Chao Jixiang. He was still worried that this person would come back and cause trouble. If it was only two Qianhu, he could withstand this pressure. That's good. Mao Mu knew what Qian Xingbao was worried about. However, there were some things that he couldn't say out loud, so he temporarily agreed. But he knew that with this start, the rest of the matter would be easy to handle. He followed Qian Xingbao to draft the internal affairs report. For example, Qian Xingbao could basically appoint officials. This was one of his powers as the head eunuch. After receiving the internal affairs report written by Qian Xingbao, Mao Mu left the palace and went to the embroidered uniform guard factory. Xin Nantang and the others first took the silver back home to comfort their families. Then they came to the embroidered uniform guard factory and waited for news. After all, it was Mao Mu's words before. Whether they would be promoted or not was not certain. If this chief eunuch who served the empress was all talk and no action, then they would have to suffer. It was no wonder that everyone had such thoughts. Xin Nantang and the others didn't do anything wrong, but offending the Chao family was the biggest crime. In addition, over the years, Empress Qian's strength had not been obvious. She was basically an invisible person. No one knew what kind of power the head eunuch who served her had. Not long after, Mao Mu appeared. Seeing everyone standing here waiting for him, how could he not know what they were thinking? After chuckling, he took out the internal affairs reports written by the head eunuch, Qian Xingbao, and handed them to Xin Nantang and the others one by one according to their names. Sure enough, it was a decree of promotion, seeing that they were still prisoners a few hours ago, but in the blink of an eye they had become Qianhu, Baihu, Zongji, and other officials with ranks. Everyone was naturally excited. When they looked at Mao Mu, there was no longer any contempt in their eyes. Instead, they were burning with passion. At this time, Mao Mu put away the smile on his face and became very serious. This Gong has given you what this Gong promised. Next, it will depend on everyone's performance. Next, I will announce the mission. Xin Nantang, Wu Ben, Luo Zhu, and the others immediately straightened their bodies. They were like an army that was about to be inspected. There are 3 main missions. First, unite those who have been oppressed by the Chow family but have the ability. Of course, those who have the ability but are depressed can also be roped in. They can be allocated according to their ability. Those who have the ability to become Qianhu can become Qianhu. But remember, don't accept those who don't have the ability. If anyone wants to make up the numbers and is caught by this gong, then whoever recommended them will also be guilty. They will also be abandoned by this gong. Do you understand? This was something he had learned from Yang Qindong. Although Mao Mu had not done much work, the intelligence team that contacted him would often inform him of Yang Xie's actions and methods. From Mao Mu's point of view, the recommendation was the right thing to do. In this way, it could prevent the incompetent from being promoted to the position to the greatest extent. It was unlike the great Ming dynasty, where as long as one had connections and even gave money, one could become an official. Even if there was a problem in the future, it would be a scam to just say that they had made a mistake. Reporting to Gong Mao, we understand. Xin Nantang and the others immediately replied loudly. As people who had been oppressed, they had many brothers around them. Previously, they were worried that their strength was too limited. Now that they could expand their team, things would be easier. After finishing the first mission, Mao Mu began to talk about the second. The second mission is to keep an eye on the Chow family and find evidence that they are criminals. When the time is right, strike hard. Only then will you be able to truly stand out. In fact, there was no need for Mao Mu to say this. Xin Nantang and the others would do it. After all, they had suffered so much because of the other party. Now that they had a chance to make up for it, how could they be polite? Struggles had always been like this. It was either you die or I live. History had also proven that soft-hearted people could not achieve great things. All right, let's talk about the third mission. In summary, there is only one word: obedience. Mao Mu's voice unconsciously became louder as he continued. What I want is obedience, as long as it is in order for me. You must unconditionally carry it out. On the contrary, as for other people's orders, you must not oppose them. The specific matters are up to you. This eunuch also wants to say that Qianhu is not the end of your career. As long as you have outstanding ability and make outstanding contributions, you could be promoted to the position of town protector, Commander Qianshi, comrade, or even commander. After saying this, Xin Nantang and the others' eyes immediately widened. Commander, although it was only a third-rank official position, the real power it held was something that even second-rank officials could not compare to. In the past, a fourth-rank official was an existence that they admired for life. They did not expect that they would have the opportunity to sit in that position. There was nothing to say. Next, they would strive for this goal until the end. As for the obedience that Mao Mu mentioned, no one had any resistance. Although the establishment of the embroidered uniform guard was more to serve the imperial power, in the end, they still had to obey someone. Mao Mu had freed them from the abyss of suffering and was one of the chief eunuchs of the palace. So if they obeyed Mao Mu, wouldn't that be the same as obeying the imperial power? As for what Mao Mu said, if there were other people's orders, no one should oppose them. That was just doing a superficial job of respect. The embroidered uniform guard was very good at this, so there was no need to teach them. Everyone knew what to do. After the 3 orders were announced, everyone began to get busy. Recruiting people and finding evidence was the focus of their work now. As for the powerful Chow family of the embroidered uniform guard, although everyone was still a little afraid in their hearts when they thought about it, would they be fine if they did not become enemies with them? Since there would be a battle sooner or later, there was no need to be polite. Let's see whose methods were stronger. As long as Mao Mu could block Chao Jixiang's sharpness after his return, they had nothing to be afraid of. After all, these people were all capable people. Xin Nantang and the others could not take Chao Jixiang seriously because their status was not high enough to reach that level. But there were people who took Chao Jixiang seriously, such as his younger brother Chao Zhang and the others. Chao Zhang and the others were very opposed to Mao Mu coming to the embroidered uniform guard to take up the position of deputy factory director. This was because there was no permanent position in the embroidered uniform guard. On the contrary, such a position would be added in some special times. However, that was usually when the old and new factory directors took over. The problem was that Chao Zhixiang had not lost power. Didn't he frequently enter the palace to see the emperor a while ago? They did not understand why there was a deputy factory director. Of course, if it was only a deputy factory director, everyone would not be that surprised. They would worship him like a bodhisattva. Even if they were in a bad mood, they could ignore him. They were from the Chao family. As long as Chao Zhixiang's banner did not fall, what did they have to be afraid of? In the end, it was very likely that this deputy factory director would only have a name and no power. So much so that they could not even order an ordinary embroidered uniform guard around. At that time, they would probably go back with their tails between their legs. However, it seemed that Mao Mu did not think that way. He actually pulled Wu Ben, who was about to die, to be his trusted aide. Then he went to the discipline prison and ransomed several capable criminals in a row. This made it difficult for people to see through him. The embroidered uniform guard had its own rules. Those who did not commit any major crimes could be ransomed after paying the ransom. This was originally set by Chao Zhixiang. This was also a method to amass wealth. With so many brothers following them, they had to eat, and that required money. No one had any doubts about this. Mao Mu did things according to the rules and did not rely on his official status to suppress people. No one questioned anything. However, the problem was that before they could react, 2 Qianhu positions were set. They were not from the Chao family, but Shen Nantang and Wu Ben, who had been dealt with by the Chao family. Chao Zhang and the others could not stand this. This clearly meant that they wanted to seize power, right? If people who were not from the Chao family could also become Qianhu, then the blow to the Chao family could be imagined. What was even worse was that after this incident, whether or not the embroidered uniform guards would listen to the Chao family's words would be a question mark. It was impossible for Chao Zhang and the others not to panic after such a thing happened. However, there was nothing they could do. Even though they were all commanders, comrades, or administrators, in reality, they didn't have much power. They all took orders from Chao Zhixiang alone. They also did not have any channels to speak to the higher-ups. Chapter 1664. In other words, without Chao Zhixiang, these people could only control one embroidered uniform guard. If someone wanted to attack the embroidered uniform guard, they could do nothing but watch. Wait for Big Brother to come back. Everything will be done. At that time, we will make Mao Mu suffer. Seeing so many people from the Chao faction looking at him with expectant eyes, Chao Zhang had no choice but to say this. That's the only way. Everyone could only nod in agreement. Over the years, Chao Zhixiang still had some tricks up his sleeve. At least these people were convinced by him. However, they did not know that Chao Zhixiang would not be able to come back. In the southern Ming imperial court, the first person to know about Chao Zhixiang's accident was Emperor Zhu Qijin. The reason why Zhu Qijin knew about this was because Chief Eunuch Qian Sungbao told him. Qian Sungbao heard it from Mao Mu. When Mao Mu reported to Yang Qindong through his contact group that had begun to reach out to the embroidered uniform guard and obtained a good start, Yang Qindong sent this information to Mao Mu. Not only that, he also told the contact group that Yang Xie was mobilizing the military supplies, mobilizing the army, and preparing to go to war with the southern Ming Empire. This was to allow Mao Mu to stabilize his position. As for whether this would expose his strategic intentions and cause the southern Ming Empire to prepare in advance, would Yang Qindong care? Some things could not be hidden at all. What's more, Yang Qindong couldn't wait for the southern Ming Empire to gather their armies. This way, he would be able to achieve success in one battle. It would be better than attacking every single city and ultimately destroying the southern Ming Empire. What Yang Qindong wanted was a rich and populous southern Ming dynasty, not a mess. From this point of view, it was undoubtedly better to give the southern Ming Empire time to gather their army and end the war with a big battle. What did you say? In the side hall, Zhu Qijin's face was filled with shock. Then he reached out and grabbed Qian Sengbao's neck, questioning him loudly. Seeing Zhu Qijin's eyes that seemed to be able to devour people, Qian Sengbao was truly frightened. But when he thought about how he was the first to receive this information, it was equivalent to making a great contribution. He was no longer afraid and repeated, "Your Majesty, the embroidered uniform guard has sent news that eunuch Chao's matter has been exposed and has fallen into the hands of Bugnam of Gojoseon. Bugnam of Gojoseon obtained the imperial edict from Chao Jixiang's hands for Yang Shanming. Then he used the excuse that the South Ming Empire wanted to attack him and prepared to attack the South Ming Empire. Right now, Qiqian City is transferring troops and supplies to Guangxi to accumulate strength." Zhu Qijin's footsteps involuntarily took a few steps back when his hand loosened. He staggered and almost fell to the ground. Fortunately, Qian Sengbao reacted quickly and supported him. At this moment, Zhu Qijin's mind was a mess. From Qian Sengbao's report, something really did happen to Chao Jixiang. Otherwise, Qian Sengbao wouldn't have said anything about the imperial edict. This was top secret. This Chao Jixiang was truly stupid. Didn't he say it before? If things didn't go well, he had to bring the imperial edict back safely. If not, he had to burn it. How could he let it fall into the hands of Yang Qindong? Now, with the imperial edict establishing Bugnam of Gojoseon in his hands, Yang Qindong had a righteous cause in his hands. He had a legitimate reason to make a move against the South Ming Empire. This was truly lifting a rock and smashing it on his own feet. Your Majesty, are you all right?" Qian Sengbao, who was afraid that Zhu Qijin's anger would harm his body, hurriedly asked carefully after a while. Qian Sengbao's call brought Zhu Qijin back to his senses. Then he rejoiced. Fortunately, he knew everything in advance. This way, he could immediately make some preparations. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but look at Qian Sengbao with a gratified expression and said, "Great companion, you did well in this matter. The embroidered uniform guard is also very capable. Now that something has happened to Chao Jixiang, have you thought of a successor?" Previously, when Mao Mu reported this matter to Qian Sengbao, he was truly shocked. Firstly, he was shocked that Chao Jixiang would be captured by Bugnam of Gojoseon. Of course, he was secretly happy in his heart. This meant that he had one less powerful opponent. Secondly, he was shocked that this news was actually known by Mao Mu so quickly. Could it be that the embroidered uniform guard really had such strength? But why didn't he see them as capable before? Seeing Qian Sengbao's puzzled expression, Mao Mu had already prepared an explanation and said, "Duke Qian, actually there are still many capable people in the disarming uniform guard. It's just that because Chao Jixiang eliminated dissidents and only knew how to make money, he was suppressed. Now that these people have obtained Duke Qian's support and have a certain amount of power, they naturally have to do their best. It's not a big deal to find out some things." Because of Chao Jixiang, Qian Sengbao didn't know much about the embroidered uniform guard's work. Thus, he didn't have any doubts after hearing everything from Mao Mu. Then he patted Mao Mu's shoulder and said, "Not bad. You did well in this matter. Since something has happened to Duke Chao, then you can be promoted to the position of Vice Duke." "Many thanks, Duke Qian." Mao Mu was waiting for these words. Immediately, a banknote worth 220,000 was delivered to Qian Sengbao. Looking at the number on the banknote, Qian Sengbao's heart skipped a beat. Then he put it away and patted his chest, saying that he would take care of this matter. In fact, even if Mao Mu didn't give him the banknote, he most likely wouldn't be able to run away from the position of Vice Duke. After all, Qian Sengbao was already the head eunuch. If he became the embroidered uniform guard's Vice Duke, then his power would be too great. Even the emperor would be afraid of him. Even if he couldn't take the position, he couldn't let others take advantage of it. It had to be known that other than Chao Jixiang, there was still the imperial horse eunuch, Kai Zhong, keeping an eye on him. Compared to the ambitious Kai Zhong, the obedient Mao Mu, who knew how to be filial to him, was more suitable. How could Mao Mu not understand this logic? However, he still gave the banknote. It was for the sake of making Qian Sungbao put more effort into recommending him. Using 200,000 taels of silver to settle the matter and obtain the position of Vice Duke of the Embroidered Uniform Guard was definitely not a loss. When the emperor asked, Qian Sungbao, who was already prepared, immediately said, "Your Majesty, have you forgotten? Didn't Duke Mao Mu, who served the Empress, become the Vice Duke of the Embroidered Uniform Guard? It must be said that he is quite capable. In such a short time, he has already managed the Embroidered Uniform Guard in an orderly manner. For example, this information was provided by him. Oh, he actually has this kind of ability. It seems that we have overlooked the talented person by our side. Since that's the case, Mao Mu is capable and loyal enough. Furthermore, he has the recommendation of the Vice Duke. Then, let Mao Mu take over the position of Vice Duke. Tell him that we look forward to his continued efforts and creating new achievements." This subject obeys. Qian Sungbao saw that he had achieved his goal and was naturally overjoyed. However, the worry on Zhu Qijin's face did not disappear. He continued, "How about this? Pass down our decree and announce to the world that the previous Vice Duke of the Embroidered Uniform Guard, Chao Jixiang, stole our imperial edict and secretly stamped the imperial seal. The southern Ming imperial court will not recognize his actions, and neither will we." Zhu Qijin acted shamelessly. Although smart people could clearly see what was going on, would a eunuch, even if he had some power, really dare to secretly write an imperial edict and stamp it with the imperial seal? However, seeing through was one thing. If Zhu Qijin did not recognize it, at least he could salvage some of the influence. Mao Mu thus became the Vice Duke of the Embroidered Uniform Guard. Shen Nantang, Wu Ben, and the others were naturally overjoyed. Chao Zheng and the others' expressions were very ugly. Their backer, Chao Jixiang, had fallen into the hands of Bugnam of Gojoseon. It could be imagined that he would not return in this lifetime. As people of Chao Jixiang's faction, where should they go from here? Chao Zheng was the current commander of the Embroidered Uniform Guard. It seemed that he held great power. However, he was just a dog by Chao Jixiang's side, a chess piece. In the end, he was just an important chess piece. He was not a eunuch. Without an imperial edict, he could not enter the palace, let alone see the emperor. In terms of influence in the palace in front of the emperor, he was naturally far inferior to Mao Mu, who was originally the head of the eunuchs. Now that Mao Mu's position was above his, Chao Zheng was suddenly in a difficult position. He did not know what to do. Bow down to Mao Mu? The people of Chao Jixiang, who had always been proud, were not willing to do so. At least, Chao Zheng believed that he and the others still had the strength to fight. Thinking of the arrangements that his elder brother, Chao Jixiang, had made in the Embroidered Uniform Guard for more than 10 years, he decided to wrestle with Mao Mu. As long as he could control the entire Embroidered Uniform Guard, at that time, he would not have to worry about Mao Mu not coming to talk to him. At that time, he would bow down and raise some conditions. Then, he would be able to regain the initiative. Chao Zheng told his thoughts to the other people of Chao Jixiang and received everyone's support. They were all grasshoppers on the same rope. At this moment, no one could escape. They could only try their best. However, they had imagined themselves to be too powerful, and they had underestimated Mao Mu too much. Without power, without an official position, and without a strong economic foundation like Mao Mu, the result of the struggle was inevitable. In particular, after the Embroidered Uniform Guard learned that Chao Jixiang had been captured by Bugnam of Gojoseon, the people who had been suppressed immediately began to have ideas. At this time, Shen Nantang, Wu Ben, and the others began to recruit people. They gave money and official positions. It was easy to imagine who would be willing to work for the Chao Jisheng faction. Not long after, not only did the people who had been suppressed stand on Shen Nantong's side, the neutral people also stood on Shin Nantong's side. Even some of the unimportant people in the Chao Jisheng faction began to have ideas and came to seek refuge. Moreover, they were not empty-handed. They had all sorts of evidence of corruption in the Chao Jisheng faction. Everyone kicks a man who is down. After nearly a month, the embroidered uniform guard began a bloody purge. Anyone who was a member of the Chao Jisheng faction or was related to the Chao Jisheng faction in the end became the target of the purge. Mao Mu was beginning to prepare for Yang Xie's entry in advance. He wanted to give Yang Xie a team that could fight, not a person who only held a position and did not do anything. Chapter 1665. The chaos within the embroidered uniform guard naturally didn't escape the eyes of the ministers, so they happily clapped their hands. For a long time, the existence of the embroidered uniform guard was like a sharp arrow suspended above the heads of the ministers, making them endlessly afraid. After all, you can guarantee that you won't make a mistake, but can you guarantee that your family won't make a mistake? If the embroidered uniform guard wanted to deal with you, they could always find your weakness. If it was light, they could blackmail you. If it was heavy, they could send you to the imperial prison. Who knew how many officials had fallen into their hands because of this? High and mighty officials had become prisoners. Now, the embroidered uniform guard was in chaos. They could relax and not be so afraid. Because of this, during this period of time, many ministers had reported the benefits of the embroidered uniform guard. They wanted to use their own advocacy to make the embroidered uniform guard last longer. It would be best if they crippled their own martial arts and got rid of this department for a long time. Zhu Qijin saw so many ministers agree and compared himself to Yao Shan, saying how wise he was. In addition, Mao Mu really didn't have any thoughts. After taking care of the Chao faction, he handed over all the gold and silver he had stolen from them. He actually collected 2 million taels of silver, making him endlessly happy. What was wrong with the emperor? He also needed money. As long as he had money, his subordinates would be willing to work for him. Only then would he be able to achieve fair rewards and punishments. It could be said that a rich emperor's back was strong and could do anything he wanted. As for a poor emperor, it was just a thought. Now that Zhu Qijin had money, he began to mobilize his troops and prepare provisions and military equipment. He wanted to have a showdown with Yang Xi. At this time, Qian Sengbao reported that the embroidered uniform guard's director, Mao Mu, wanted to see him. He said that he had something important to report to the emperor. At this time, after Mao Mu unified the embroidered uniform guard, he began to bare his fangs. He slowly went past Qian Sengbao to report to Zhu Qijin. This was the first time he tried to sound him out, so Mao Mu wasn't too anxious. Instead, he wrote some of the contents of his report to Qian Sengbao. When Qian Sengbao saw the report that was nearly a foot thick, he knew that he couldn't do this. He could report according to the text, but once it involved specific matters, if the emperor asked a detailed question, he couldn't answer. Thus, he took the initiative to ask Mao Mu to personally report to him. Faced with Qian Sengbao's request, Mao Mu naturally rejected it. He even said that he was Qian Sengbao's subordinate, so how could he report to the emperor without his permission? This was impossible. Mao Mu's attitude made Qian Sengbao very satisfied, and he immediately confirmed what he wanted to report. This led to today's events. The recent work of the embroidered uniform guards had been very effective. Not only did they win the reputation of the officials, but they also earned money. Zhu Qijin had long wanted to call Mao Mu to encourage them. However, his great companion, Qian Sengbao, said that Mao Mu was very busy, so he gave up the idea. Now that the other party had come knocking on his door, of course he had to meet him. In the Qinzhen Hall, Mao Mu saw Zhu Qijin sitting high on the dragon throne. He also saw Qian Xingbao standing to the side with a smile on his face. For some reason, he always had a feeling that behind that smile was a hidden killing intent, as if he did not perform well, the other party would come to settle the score with him. Mao Mu knew his own strength very well. Although he had taken control of the embroidered uniform guards, he had been silent for too long. If he wanted to fight Qian Xingbao head-on, his strength was still not enough. Now that he still needed to rely on the other party, he naturally knew what to do next. First, he respectfully knelt on the ground and kowtowed, shouting "Long live." After Zhu Qijin asked him to stand up, he stood up and gave a detailed report on the performance of the ministers, especially those officials who went to Yangxia. Their actions were reported by Mao Mu in detail. At first, Zhu Qijin still had a smile on his face. He could feel that Mao Mu's work was very detailed, which made him very happy. He was excited that he had found another talent. However, as Mao Mu reported more and more, he began to lose his cool, especially after hearing so many officials talk about how powerful Yangxia was and how he could not defeat them. His face turned black. He knew that Yangxia would not be so kind as to let the officials go to Tsuxian City for free. However, when he considered that Yangxia was indeed powerful, there were many things that could be learned. In addition, his arrogance caused trouble. In Zhu Qijin's heart, Yingtian Prefecture used to be the capital of the great Ming dynasty. Later on, it became the capital. The prosperity here was not something that a deserted island could catch up to in a short time. He wanted to see Yang Qindong make a fool of himself and let everyone see the difference between the two sides. In order to calm the hearts of the officials, he agreed to send the observation team. However, ever since the Crown Prince's junior tutor, Minister of War Kuang Yi, was chased back early and heard about what happened in Yangxia, he felt that things were going to go south. He hurriedly gave an edict to end the observation team early. He thought that since the time was too short, it should not be a big problem. During this period of time, he was preparing for war and did not care so much about it. Now that he heard Mao Mu's report, he knew that the attitude of the officials under him had changed greatly. Following Mao Mu's report, these officials actually compared Crimson City to a heaven-like existence and even exaggerated the strength of the Yang faction. There were even people who were pessimistic and said that if the Southern Ming Empire fought with the Yang faction, they would definitely lose. This was disrupting the morale of the army. Even if these people were killed, it would not be enough to vent his anger. Zhu Qijin was angry. Investigate. If there are any unfavorable words, investigate them thoroughly. As you command, Mao Mu hurriedly replied. However, he did not leave immediately. Instead, he raised his head and gave Qian Xingbao a meaningful look. After Qian Xingbao received the signal, he hurriedly bowed and said respectfully, "Your Majesty, I'm afraid that just investigating is useless. Some people will not shed tears until they see the coffin. If we allow them to develop, I'm afraid that before the army even leaves, the morale of the army will already be broken. How can we win then? As the saying goes, special times call for special measures. Yes, Dehu is right. Right now, the Southern Ming dynasty is facing a matter of life and death. We cannot be soft-hearted. If we investigate them, we will lock them up and deal with them. However, you must remember that we must have evidence. We cannot catch the wrong person." Zhu Qijin said as if he had just realized something. This was the result that Mao Mu wanted. After saying, "As you command," he left the side hall. For Qian Xingbao to stand up at this time, it was naturally the result of discussion. In Mao Mu's words, this was a good opportunity to accumulate wealth. Those officials were all rich people. As long as they caught them, they would not have to worry about not having enough money to ransom them. In short, this time they had to make the officials bow their heads to the eunuchs. Qian Xingbao was 100% in favor of Mao Mu's suggestion. Ever since the defeat of the Timu castle because of Wang Jin, the eunuchs had always been the target of the officials. If Zhu Qijin did not like the eunuchs, They would have no way to survive if it was an emperor. As the chief eunuch, Qian Sengbeo had always been careful. He was afraid that if he did something wrong, it would cause the officials to impeach him. Now that he finally had a chance to fight back, he would definitely seize the opportunity. Thus, the officials were originally clapping and cheering as they watched the embroidered uniform guards fall into chaos. However, they could not be happy because after the embroidered uniform guards had a unified leader, they began to target them. On the day that Mao Mu left the Qinjing Hall, for officials had their homes searched by the embroidered uniform guards. Among them, one was a 4th-rank official and 3 were 5th-rank officials. Although their ranks were a little low, it was already a clear signal. Soon, news spread from the palace. This was the start of the operation after Mao Mu, the new embroidered uniform guards, reported to the emperor. However, it was also said that Mao Mu only said that he wanted to investigate. It was Qian Sengbeo who suggested to arrest the eunuchs. He also said that special times called for special measures. These officials did not dare to scold the emperor, but Qian Sengbeo was just a eunuch. They did not have any scruples. For a moment, curses were heard everywhere. The impeachment memorials were as numerous as the hair on an ox. They covered the dragon table. Qian Sengbeo was really angry. He first severely punished the eunuchs who were on duty in the Qinjing Hall that day. After killing 3 and seriously injuring 9, he did not get anything out of them. But it did not matter. Things had already come to this. Qian Sengbeo was determined to go all the way and teach these officials a lesson. He immediately sent someone to inform Mao Mu to increase the intensity. In short, he wanted the civil officials to bow their heads to him, the chief eunuch. Otherwise, the arrest would not stop. The Minister of Revenue's residence, Wang Shang, was riding a bicycle in the courtyard with an unhappy expression. Her small face was scrunched up. Anyone who saw her would know that she was unhappy. Ever since returning from Tsushin City, Wang Jiqing had been riding a bicycle through the capital streets and alleys. He did not know how many people looked at him, but he also did not know how many envious gazes he received. After all, Wang Jiqing was still a child. His desire to show off was at its peak. Thus, he rode the bicycle even faster. In addition, the children of the other officials had also bought 4 bicycles. They traveled with 5 bicycles, which attracted a lot of attention. As the younger sister, Wang Shang was naturally unhappy. She also had a share of the money used to buy the bicycles. Moreover, she had borrowed quite a bit from her sisters. Why should her brother take all the fruits of victory for himself? She acted coquettishly and persuaded Wang Jiqing in every possible way. In the end, Wang Jiqing had no choice but to agree to lend the bicycles to her for 3 days after half a month of riding. Although it was only 3 days, Wang Shang was already very satisfied. After all, in this era, women were mostly in a subordinate position. It was impossible for them to enjoy true fairness. She scratched her fingers day after day. Finally, when it was time for her to use the bicycles for 3 days, her grandfather suddenly had the servants close the courtyard doors after the morning court session. He also said that no one in the family was allowed to leave without permission. Chapter 1666. Wang Shang couldn't accept this. She had already asked her friends to ride the bike together, and she wanted to show off like an older brother. How could she be happy when her plans were disrupted? After riding a few laps around the courtyard, Wang Shang felt that she had completely adapted to the bicycle and could ride it with ease. Then, she carefully went to the back door of the manor with her personal maidservant. As the young master, she ordered the servants to open the door and went out into the streets. Wang Shang could finally ride the bike on the streets. She could feel the envious gazes of the passers-by, especially those who looked like scholars. They pointed at her from afar and looked at her with yearning. She immediately felt proud, like a general who had just won a battle. However, the good times didn't last long. A few burly embroidered uniform guards suddenly rushed out from the side of the street and blocked Wang Shang's path. The sudden breaking caused Wang Shang to almost fall to the ground. Then she shouted unhappily, "Good dogs don't block the road." Wang Shang claimed that she was the granddaughter of Minister Wang, so there weren't many things in the world that could scare her. She thought that the embroidered uniform guards would immediately retreat after she shouted her name. She didn't expect that she and her bike would be arrested after she said her name. Only her maidservant was left standing on the ground and crying anxiously. Wang Shang was quickly brought to the embroidered uniform guard's office after she was arrested. Her bike was detained, and she was also arranged to a small room so that she could explain her views on Crimson City. Her identity seemed to have worked because the embroidered uniform guard smiled and guided her. "Miss, you've been to Crimson City before, so you must know where it is. I heard that you're quite good at writing. Can you write it down? If you write well, not only can we let you go, we can also give you a bike. How about it?" Wang Shang didn't like the embroidered uniform guards because of her grandfather. However, when she heard that she could get a bike if she performed well, she was tempted. She didn't want to borrow a bike from her brother. It would be great if she could have one herself. She immediately asked, "Do you really have a bike?" "Of course. Our Imperial Secret Service is very capable. It's just a bicycle," Luo Zhu, who was wearing a commander's uniform, said with a smile on his face. "All right, bring me a pen and paper." For the sake of a bicycle, Wang Shang was willing to go all out. As for what would happen if these embroidered uniform guards lied to him afterwards, wasn't that simple? He could just complain to his grandfather. He didn't believe that they weren't afraid of the Minister of Revenue. Wang Shang was indeed from a scholarly family. It didn't take him long to write an essay. Although it wasn't particularly beautiful, the sentences were smooth. Especially when he described the beauty of Crimson Castle. His strokes were divine. The description was quite good. Wang Shang also played a little trick. As if she was afraid that the other party would not think highly of her essay, she even added some sentences about her grandfather, Wang Zhua, in her essay. Her intention was very simple. She wanted to tell the other party about her identity and not to look down on others. If there were any benefits, they had to share it with her. Satisfied, Luo Zhu left. He told Wang Shang that he still needed to report to the higher-ups to see if the essay was up to standard. Then they would consider rewarding him with a bicycle. Wang Shang was so happy that she urged him to hurry up. With this essay in hand, Luo Zhu went to find Xin Nantang, who had become a commander of the Imperial Secret Service. After the Chao family was expelled from the Imperial Secret Service, the people who had followed Mao Mu from the beginning were promoted. For example, Luo Zhu was promoted to a 4th-rank commander, and Xin Nantang was promoted to a 3rd-rank commander. Xin Nantang looked at Wang Shang's essay and couldn't bear to see it. Wang's reputation among the people was quite good. He wasn't greedy and didn't form factions. He was one of the few good officials in the southern Ming dynasty. However, there was no other way. It was eunuch Mao Mu's idea to trap the Wang family. Now, no one in the Imperial Secret Service dared to question eunuch Mao Mu. Mao Mu's status and influence in the Imperial Secret Service was far greater than Chao Jishang's. This was all because Mao Mu thought about everyone and was willing to spend money. What he meant was that unless he gave the order, the Imperial Secret Service wasn't allowed to accept bribes. It was precisely because of this that the Imperial Secret Service was holding their chests high. This was because they didn't ask for help and didn't have anything that could be used against them. Of course, they had also paid a lot of money for Fu Mao Mu. In addition to not deducting a single cent from the wages of the Imperial Secret Service, he would also give everyone a monthly allowance based on their contributions. Last month, those who performed well received 120 taels. For the Imperial Secret Service, this wasn't just enough to feed their families. It was already a source of income. Since it was eunuch Mao Mu's order, Xin Nantang naturally had to follow it. Not to mention, the position of commander was there for everyone to see. Between him and Wu Ben, whoever performed well would be given that position. At this moment, he couldn't afford to make any mistakes. Bring those essays over. I'll give them to Eunuch Mao. With a sigh, Shen Nantang finally bowed his head to reality. There was nothing he could do. This was the sorrow of a small figure. He didn't do things according to his own will. Very quickly, the essays were delivered to Mao Mu. After briefly reading through them, he went straight to the Hall of Diligent Government. After this period of hard work, he now had the qualifications to report to Zhu Qijin alone. It was the same treatment as Chao Jixiang in the past. Although he had the treatment, Mao Mu still kept a low profile. When he entered the side hall, he saw that Qian Sengbao was on duty. He quickly bowed and explained his purpose. In the end, he didn't forget to add, Eunuch Qian, next month's allowance will be sent to you in 2 days. He. Qian Sengbao's face was full of smiles. That was tens of thousands of taels of silver. In his eyes, Mao Mu was undoubtedly a god of wealth. Although he was curious about where the other party got the money, no matter what, it was enough that the money was sent to him. Why would he care so much about it? Oh, right. Have you thought about who to give the position of commander to? Qian Sengbao couldn't help but ask. That was an income of 500,000 taels of silver. How could he not be anxious? Eunuch Qian, you also know that both Wu Ben and Shen Nantang have performed well. In order to give them more motivation, this matter has to be delayed. Of course, the money will definitely be sent in the end. It's just a matter of a month or 2 to show filial respect to you. Mao Mu explained with a smile. Haha, it's fine. This eunuch is just asking. Qian Sengbao smiled politely and then said, All right, His Majesty is still waiting for you. Quickly go and do your job. Yes. Mao Mu bowed again. Only then did he tidy up his clothes. After seeing that there were no problems, he strode into the side hall. After Mao Mu sent the articles in front of Zhu Qijin, it only took a short while for a roar to be heard. You dare to care about these officials? You're taking the salary we give you and not doing your job properly. Instead, you're thinking about the good of others. Hateful. Mao Mu lowered his head and picked up the articles scattered on the ground. After waiting for Zhu Qijin to calm down a little, he asked tentatively, Your Majesty, what should we do next? Arrest them? Facing this question, Zhu Qijin's face revealed a pained expression. He had already seen it. These articles were basically written by the officials of the court and even the descendants of important officials. Didn't that mean that these important officials were unreliable? If they really arrested people based on the list of people who wrote the articles, the Southern Ming Empire would be in chaos for a while. However, they could not arrest them. These people's hearts were no longer with the Southern Ming Empire. If they continued to be put in important positions, it would only be more dangerous. As the saying goes, a short pain is better than a long pain. Take it. Take all the people in this article. Take all their backings and investigate them thoroughly. But remember, don't use torture to extort confessions. And you should know your limits. You're also an old person in the palace. Mao Mu, you've done well recently. Zhan is very pleased. After Zhu Qijin vented his anger, he looked at Mao Mu with admiration in his eyes. This person was able to do things so beautifully in such a short period of time and obtain information that could be used against those officials. His methods were truly outstanding. Why didn't he realize that this person was a talent before? Mao Mu knelt on the ground gratefully and quickly kowtowed. This is all because of your Majesty and Empress teachings. This servant should do his duty. All right, you can rise. You're really good. In the future, you can call yourself a subject in front of Zhen. There's no need to call yourself a servant. Zhu Qijin laughed and gave Mao Mu another privilege. Don't look at this simple title. In the entire group of eunuchs, only 3 people could call themselves subjects. They were Qian Sengbao, Kai Zhong, and the captured Chao Jixiang. Right now, Mao Mu had replaced Chao Jixiang's previous position. Yes, this subject thanks your majesty again. Ha ha ha. Looking at the kneeling Mao Mu, Zhu Qijin stroked his beard and laughed in satisfaction. After leaving the palace and receiving the imperial decree, Mao Mu was in high spirits. No one knew better than him that the people who were captured this time were all capable officials of the Southern Ming Empire. In other words, once these officials were imprisoned, it was equivalent to the Southern Ming Empire's political power collapsing by half. This was greatly beneficial for the Yangtze's next move against the Southern Ming Empire. At the same time, the official residence of the Ministry of Personnel had already become chaotic. Wang's most beloved granddaughter, Wang Shang, had mischievously walked out of the residence and was caught by the embroidered uniformed guards on the streets. When the accompanying servant girl came back to report, bursts of crying rang out in the manor. Wang Shang's mother, Wang Zhangshi, was the one crying the loudest. Her crying made Wang's eldest son, Wang Shang's father, Wang Guang, who was currently serving in the Ministry of Personnel, extremely anxious. Wang Zhuo quickly found out about the commotion here. His wife, Wang Songshi, also started crying. She then said that the embroidered uniform guards were all bastards, demons who killed without batting an eyelid. This time, Wang Shang had fallen into their hands. Who knew what would happen? Chapter 16, 67. Compared to the woman who only knew how to cry, Wang Zhuo was clearly much calmer. If it were in the past, he would definitely be very nervous when the embroidered uniform guard captured his family. He knew that the embroidered uniform guard was best at listing crimes. When they wanted to deal with a person, they would often use all kinds of methods. Even if there was no crime, they would put the blame on the person, causing many unjust and wrong cases. This was also the reason why the officials disliked and hated the embroidered uniform guard. However, now that the embroidered uniform guard had undergone an internal reorganization, the new chief Mao Mu was a good old man. He smiled at everyone he saw. Moreover, this kind of smile wasn't superficial. It was a real smile. Because Wang Zhuo often went to the palace, he had met him twice. Both times, the other party was very respectful. This was something that Wang Zhuo, who boasted that he had seen countless people, could clearly feel. The embroidered uniform guard had changed its leader, so its style should also change. Even so, the outcome of Wang Shang's capture might not be so bad. Wang Zhuo comforted himself in his heart. He was still wondering if he should go to the palace or directly ask the embroidered uniform guard for Wang Shang. With his status as a minister, in addition to his influence and seniority in the court, Mao Mu would definitely give him face. However, he was a minister after all and had been a minister for several dynasties. In terms of calmness, he was still good. He still wanted to see the situation before making a decision. He didn't want to give up his old face to beg for help so quickly. He still wanted to. There was no need to think. Before Wang Zhuo could make a decision, the embroidered uniform guard had already arrived. First, they surrounded the prince's residence. Then a group of people jumped in through the door. The servants watching the house were so frightened that they knelt on the ground, not even having the courage to stop them. Compared to before, the current embroidered uniform guard brothers had undergone a huge change. They didn't do the dirty work of extortion and framing anymore. With money, their abilities could be put to use. The current embroidered uniform guard no longer muddled along and waited for death. Each of them was an expert and very brave. More importantly, Mao Mu no longer deducted everyone's salary. He also did his best to satisfy the embroidered uniform guard brothers in terms of equipment. In the past, because of the lack of money and the greed of the Chow family, the low-level members of the embroidered uniform guard often didn't even have the money to change their clothes. Therefore, sometimes they would wear tattered flying fish suits to carry out missions to make people feel to look very down and out. Unlike now, the flying fish suits are all over the place. Since they were in a good mood, their complexion was good, and they were all skilled in martial arts. As soon as they appeared, They gave me a feeling of elites and a murderous aura. Frightened by the embroidered uniform guards' imposing manner, no one dared to stop them. When the group of people arrived at the Wang family's courtyard, Shin Nantang shouted, "Is there anyone in charge? Come out and answer me." This time, Shin Nantang came to the prince's mansion to invite Minister Wang. This was enough to prove that the embroidered uniform guard valued this minister. Soon, the sound of footsteps could be heard. The members of the Wang clan's various courtyards, including the servants, and guards, all walked out. Walking at the front was an elderly man, but judging from his calm footsteps, although this person was very old, his aura and spirit were still very strong. Needless to say, only the Minister of Revenue, Wang Zhuo, could have such an imposing aura in the prince's residence. Wang Zhuo walked straight until he was 5 or 6 steps in front of Shin Nantang and the others. Then he said in a voice that was neither servile nor overbearing, "This official is the Minister of Revenue, Wang Zhuo. May I know your name?" Shin Nantang naturally knew Wang Zhuo. The embroidered uniform guard had detailed information about these important ministers. Therefore, when he saw the person in charge, he first cupped his hands and bowed. Then he put down his hands and put his right hand on the embroidered spring saber at his waist, saying, "Minister Wang, this humble one is the embroidered uniform guard's Minister Shin Nantang. This time, I am acting on imperial orders. I hope Minister Wang can cooperate." As he spoke, Shin Nantang took out a secret order and presented it in front of Wang Zhuo. Reaching out to take it, his eyes fell on the secret order. Seeing that it was the emperor's decree and was stamped with the imperial seal, he knew that the matter could not be changed. Wang Zhuo's brows were tightly knitted together. Then he sighed and said, "Since you are acting on the emperor's orders, this old man will naturally cooperate and go with you. However, my family is innocent. Please don't make things difficult for them." This is natural. Nowadays, the embroidered uniform guard does things according to the law. As long as Minister Wang cooperates, your family will naturally not have to worry. Shin Nantang immediately guaranteed. Hearing Shin Nantang's words, Wang Zhuo nodded and then stretched out his hand, saying, "Then this old man will go with you." "Father, grandfather, master." For a moment, the shouts came one after another. Then, uncontrollable cries came from the courtyard. Clearly, everyone could see that this time, the embroidered uniform guard had come to capture Wang Zhuo. Without this pillar of support, half of the Wang residents would collapse. "What are you crying for?" "This old man is just being asked to assist in the investigation. It's not like I have already been convicted." Wang Zhuo was not satisfied with his family's performance. His gaze fell on his eldest son, Wang Guang, and said, "Guang, father is not here. You have to take care of the family. Take care of your mother, brother, and children." "Yes, father, don't worry." Wang Guang also said with tears in his eyes. "Okay, let's go." Wang Zhuo knew that at this time, it was meaningless to say anything more. It was better to leave immediately. He said to Shin Nantang, "Shen Tongji, let's do it." Seeing that Wang Zhuo was very cooperative, Shin Nantang's eyes showed that he could not bear to see him like this. "There's no need to use tricks. This official believes that Minister Wang will cooperate with us." This meant that he did not need to be shackled. Wang Zhuo thought for a moment and threw a grateful look at Shin Nantang. After all, it would be very embarrassing to be shackled in front of his family. This was the last shred of dignity that he had left. Wang Zhuo left. The group of embroidered uniform guards did as Shin Nantang said. They did not make things difficult for the people of the Wang residence. They did not even leave people to keep an eye on them. The people of the Wang residence were free to enter and leave. If Wang Zhuo had not been taken away, perhaps everyone would have thought that it was just a dream. After Wang Zhuo left, the eldest son, Wang Guang, sent people to take good care of his mother, Wang Songshi. He also arranged for the guards and parents to guard the courtyard. Then, he hurriedly left the residence with people. He wanted to move around and find the officials that were on good terms with his father, as well as other ministers, to see if there was any way to save the situation. However, Wang Guang was destined to be disappointed, because on this day, not only was his father taken away by the embroidered uniform guards, many important officials in the court were also taken away. Among them were the Minister of Appointments Chen Sun, the Minister of Rights Xie Chong, the Minister of Justice Xiao Xian, and so on. For a moment, the capital was in chaos. The officials were also in danger. They constantly sent people to find out what had happened and whether the embroidered uniform guards would continue to take people away. In the palace, Mao Mu became the most popular person. Anyone who had some connections with him would send people to inquire about the situation. As for himself, he was drinking tea with someone in a small courtyard in the palace. Across from Mao Mu sat a eunuch wearing an official's robe. His dark eyes had already swept over Mao Mu countless times. Mao Mu hated this kind of unrestrained gaze. However, he knew that now was not the time to fall out with the eunuch. At the very least, the opportunity was not ripe yet. Across from him sat one of the 3 great eunuchs of the southern Ming dynasty, Kai Zhong, who controlled the Imperial Horse Directorate. At the same time, he was also one of the eunuchs in charge of writing. He was the kind of person who could be summoned by the emperor at any time and had the opportunity to serve him at any time. It was precisely because of Kai Zhong's relationship that he could reach the heavenly court that Mao Mu was very polite to him. He even had to bow to him as a junior. After all, in terms of age and experience, Kai Zhong was indeed much stronger than him. Only a chief eunuch like Qian Sengbao would not be at a disadvantage when facing him. Good tea. Mao Mu quietly flattered him, breaking the somewhat awkward atmosphere. Drink more of this good tea. When we leave in a moment, I will send someone to deliver some to you, Sir Mao. Kai Zhong smiled. However, when others saw this smile, they couldn't help but feel a wave of goosebumps. Many thanks, Sir Kai. However, I don't know if Sir Kai has summoned Mao Mu for something. Mao Mu didn't want to believe that Kai Zhong would be so kind as to invite him to drink tea. He definitely had something to say. At the very least, he really couldn't figure out what it was. AI, how could I dare to order you? Sir Mao is currently the Emperor's favorite. I can't wait to curry favor with you. How could I dare to order you? Sir Kai is too kind. This humble one is truly unable to accept it. Mao Mu smiled and returned Kai Zhong's gaze with a soft glare. Although in terms of experience, he was indeed inferior to Kai Zhong. If Kai Zhong wanted to step on him, he had the power to resist. With Empress Qian's approval and trust, in addition to the power he held in the embroidered uniform guard, Kai Zhong couldn't do whatever he wanted. Kai Zhong naturally understood this point. That was why he called Mao Mu over to discuss this matter and invited him to drink tea. He wasn't like the other eunuchs, who could just directly give him orders. He, sensing a trace of rejection in Mao Mu's words, Kai Zhong laughed. He could understand Mao Mu's feelings. When he first took over the position, he faced those powerful and experienced old eunuchs, just like today. It was because of this experience that he wouldn't underestimate Mao Mu, much less make an enemy out of him. He clearly understood what it meant to be a newborn calf that wasn't afraid of a tiger. Moreover, there was still Qian Senbao, the head eunuch. It wasn't time for him to compete with Mao Mu. That would only benefit others. He didn't have any intention of exploiting Mao Mu. On the contrary, he was here to befriend him. He believed that after today's matter, he would definitely maintain a good relationship with Mao Mu, at least on the surface. Sir Mao, actually, I invited you to drink tea this time because I have a request. AI, Sir Kai is really making things difficult for this humble one. If there's anything you need, just tell me, Mao Mu said politely. Chapter 1668. Good, straightforward. Since that's the case, I'll be frank. Today, the embroidered uniform guard has used thunderous methods to capture people, and the people they've captured are all officials of the observation mission heading to Crimson City. Right now, the streets are in an uproar and everyone is in danger. Some officials came to beg me, hoping that Duke Mao would be merciful. However, I don't know if Duke Mao would give me some face. Of course, I understand the rules and won't make things difficult for you. The so-called understanding the rules naturally meant giving benefits. Mao Mu was very clear on this point. It was still the same sentence. What was the point of the eunuch turning into this androgynous appearance? Wasn't it just to earn more money? With money in hand, anything was worth it, and there was nothing to fear. After understanding that the other party had come to beg for mercy, Mao Mu's anxious heart relaxed. He was truly worried that the other party might have found out something. Although the contact group that Yang Qindong had arranged for him was unknown even in the Yangtze, it was still in the capital. But after all, this group lived in the capital. If someone wanted to investigate, no one could guarantee that they wouldn't give themselves away. Especially since he had become more and more high-profile recently, there were probably many people secretly investigating him. Kai Zhong was a veteran eunuch of power, and he was also in charge of the Imperial Horse Directorate. He had the power to mobilize troops and countless capable people under his command. Who knew if he had received some information that could threaten him? Mao Mu had been worried about this. If that was the case, then he would have to fight even if he couldn't. It was just a pity that he couldn't complete the mission that Yang Qindong had given him. Now that he knew that Kai Zhong had a favor to ask of him, he could finally put down his anxious heart, and his expression became much more relaxed. However, this small change fell into Kai Zhong's eyes. Which of the eunuchs with power wasn't worry-free? Which of them wasn't an expert at reading people's expressions? When Mao Mu relaxed, Kai Zhong's gaze locked onto him. However, he didn't immediately ask, but he was certain that Mao Mu had a secret that he couldn't let others know. Mao Mu didn't know any of this. He was still interested in asking who had the face to invite eunuch Kai. Haha, I'm sure Duke Mao knows this person as well. He's the current Minister of Works, Wei Luo. He's also a member of the Observer Group. Although he didn't do anything wrong, it's better to be safe than sorry. He still entrusted himself to our family and is willing to pay 20,000 taels of silver to ensure his safety. What does Duke Mao think about this? Kai Zhong chuckled as he hid what he had just discovered in the depths of his heart and spoke with a smile. Upon hearing that he was pleading for Wei Luo, Mao Mu had a plan in his heart. This time, the Southern Ming Empire had indeed put in a lot of effort in sending the observation team to Crimson City. The fact that all 6 ministers were present was enough to prove everything. Among them, the Minister of War, Kuang Yi, had been sent back halfway because he had angered Yang Qindong. The other 5 ministers had observed the entire process. Now, 4 of the 5 had already been invited to the embroidered uniform guard, leaving only Verlo, so it was no wonder that he was nervous. However, Mao Mu had no intention of dealing with Verlo. After returning from Crimson City, Verlo had privately said that Crimson City was very powerful, that Yangtze was very powerful, and that the Southern Ming Empire couldn't compare. However, Verlo's abilities were truly limited. Under his leadership, the Ministry of Works hadn't made much progress in the past few years, and the cannons they were building were still solid shells. Verlo's strength lay in flattery, using his high position to seize power and amass wealth. During his time in charge of the Ministry of Works, a few capable officials had been suppressed. How could such people be Mao Mu's target? He clearly knew that Yang Qindong's orders were to arrest all capable officials and disrupt the upper echelons of the Southern Ming Empire's political power. Mediocre officials like Verlo naturally wouldn't be affected. On the contrary, such people should have more power. This way, they would be more in line with Yang Xie's interests. Thus, even without Kai Zhong's pleading, Mao Mu wouldn't have made a move against Verlo. He still needed to keep these people to explain to the emperor that not all of the members of the observer group had become disloyal. This was clear proof. Haha, Verlo, to be honest, said some things that crossed the line. His name is on the embroidered uniform guard's next arrest list. Although Mao Mu had already decided to let Vrlo go and give Kai Zhong face, the process was still important. However, the process was still very important. How to make the other party accept this favor was especially important. Hearing that this was indeed the case, Kai Zhong couldn't help but nod. He didn't know what the emperor thought of the observer group and thought that he wanted to capture them all in one fell swoop. Thus, he naturally didn't doubt Mao Mu's words. Because of this, Kai Zhong's face bloomed into a smile. However, he didn't know how disgusting this smile was in Mao Mu's eyes. I'll have to trouble Duke Mao to put more thought into this matter. I'll remember this favor. Kai Zhong smiled, his eyes revealing an expectant expression. Mao Mu first pretended to be in a difficult position. Then, as if he had made a decision, he said, "All right, since even Duke Kai has spoken, I'll do my best." Although he said that he would do his best, since he had spoken, there was nothing that couldn't be done. Immediately, Kai Zhong's smile grew even wider. After discussing business and pocketing the 20,000 taels of silver Mao Mu left, seeing his departing figure, Kai Zhong gradually put away the smile on his face. With a snap of his fingers, a sturdy man walked into the small courtyard. "Uncle." The man's surname was Kai Ge, and he was Kai Zhong's nephew. After entering the palace, Kai Gu had spent a great deal of effort to find this nephew of his among the common people. Then he allowed him to live a life of luxury and let him continue the Kai family's bloodline. It could be said that he was Kai Zhong's trusted aide. Keep an eye on this Mao Mu. I keep feeling that there's something about him that no one knows. Thinking of the relaxed expression on Mao Mu's face, Kai Zhong decided to investigate carefully. Perhaps there would be an unexpected surprise. After Mao Mu left Kai Zhong, the corners of his mouth rose into a slight smile. Who did he think he was? Treating him to a cup of tea and taking out 20,000 taels of silver could solve the problem of a minister? Mao Mu was even certain that the Ministry of Works Minister Wei Luo had taken out more than 20,000 taels of silver. It was just that Kai Zhong had embezzled some of it. This was even better. He could kill two birds with one stone. He thought about how to deal with Kai Zhong. He had a feeling that the other party's smile was sinister and vicious, like a poisonous snake that would bite in the dark. If he wasn't careful, he could be poisoned to death. The existence of such a person was definitely a hidden danger to his plan. If possible, he had to get rid of him first. Thinking this, Mao Mu returned to the Empress Palace. When he saw the Emperor's imperial carriage, he knew that the Emperor had come to see Empress Qian. He straightened his body and walked into the palace. As the chief eunuch of Empress Qian's palace, Mao Mu had great prestige here. In addition, he was willing to spend money. The eunuchs here were all very respectful when they saw him, and there was a sense of respect that came from their bones. After all, in a place like the palace where internal strife was fierce and people could die at any time, it was very important to have a good subordinate. It meant that your chances of survival would greatly increase. Duke Mao is back. There were people constantly greeting him, and Mao Mu also responded with a smile. He walked to the Empress Palace and didn't see Qian Xingbao. He probably wasn't on duty today. Thinking that this was a good thing, he could carry out his plan. Thus, he strode into the palace. In the Empress Palace, Empress Qian was eating with Zhu Qijin. After seeing Mao Mu walk in, Empress Qian didn't care. She was really an empress who stood aloof from worldly affairs and was extremely kind. She also knew that the eunuchs around her were favored by the emperor and entrusted with important tasks, so she wasn't angry when she didn't see them serving her. If this kind of personality became a concubine in the Qing palace, she probably wouldn't even survive one episode. She would be played to death by others. This subject greets the emperor and empress. Long live the emperor and long live the empress. As soon as he entered the palace, Mao Mu hurriedly knelt on the ground and bowed. "Oh, it's beloved official Mao. Quickly get up." Zhu Qijin glanced at Mao Mu, and his eyes revealed a joyful expression. Then he thought of something and asked, "Beloved official Mao, have the important officials been arranged? Remember, you must interrogate them properly, but you must ask according to their physical condition. Don't be too hasty. Some of them are really too old." This wasn't Zhu Qijin sympathizing with the subordinates. This came from his heart. For example, the Minister of Revenue, Wang Zhuo. He was now 84 years old, and it was rare that he still had such a healthy body. Perhaps this was because the food he ate didn't have any waste oil or additives. It was all natural. In reality, Wang's fate had changed because of Yang Qindong's appearance. In history, he died in the Tumu Castle. However, in this life, he was saved and came to the capital of the southern Ming dynasty. He had been serving Emperor Yingzong and had lived until now. His health was quite good. From this point, it could be seen that Zhu Qijin really didn't have anyone he could use. Otherwise, at his age, he would have already retired and returned to his hometown. How could he still serve the court? Mao Mu understood Zhu Qijin's meaning. He immediately bowed and said, "This subject obeys the decree. There is no rush to interrogate them. First, we must protect their bodies. Wait for them to see our southern Ming dynasty defeat Yangxie, and let them know how wrong they are." Zhu Qijin was only worried that the embroidered uniform guards' methods would be too harsh. As the emperor, he knew some of the embroidered uniform guards' methods. That was why he reminded them. Because once these officials were beaten to death in prison, the other officials would definitely report to the emperor and impeach him. At that time, he would have a headache. Chapter 1669. But unexpectedly, Mao Mu's understanding was to only capture these people and slowly torture them until the day the Southern Ming Empire won, and let these officials see his style as the emperor. This also reminded Zhu Qijin. He nodded and said with satisfaction, "Yes, that's the reason." "Ha! Beloved official Mao's words are exactly what we want. Come, reward me." This official doesn't dare to ask for a reward. Everything is what this official should do. Right now, the imperial court is going to exterminate the Yang bandits, and it's time to use money. This official wishes to wear armor and go to the battlefield to kill the enemy. How can this official still want the emperor's money to satisfy my own selfish desires? Mao Mu said righteously, and the more he spoke, the straighter his body became. Zhu Qijin was very moved. "Good, you have ambition. It's just that we don't agree to let you go to the battlefield to kill the enemy. You are a capable person and should be by our side to share our burdens." Ha! Empress, you've really trained a talent." When he was happy, Zhu Qijin even praised Empress Qian. Seeing Zhu Qijin smile, Empress Qian was also very happy. She said, "All of this is the emperor's good fortune. The heavens bless the imperial family, and the emperor has a good eye for people. It has nothing to do with this concubine." Ha! After being flattered by the empress, Zhu Qijin's mood became even better. He was happy to have such a confidant and a capable subject. However, what made Zhu Qijin even happier was that Mao Mu once again knelt on the ground and bowed. Reporting to the emperor, this official made a small mistake just now. Unikai Zhong found this official. Next, Mao Mu recounted what had happened just now from the beginning to the end. Finally, he took out the 20,000 taels of silver and presented it in his hand. "This official doesn't know if what I did was right because Minister Wei is indeed innocent. However, when I thought that if I refused to accept this money, the other party would inevitably think too much and I would not be able to work for the emperor with peace of mind. In order to calm the people, I accepted it. Now, I am willing to hand over all of the money. This way, there will be more brave warriors on the front lines." Good. This time, Zhu Qijin was so happy that he said good twice. The way Mao Mu handled matters was indeed to his liking. Not only would he be able to appease the fear in the officials' hearts, but he would also be able to collect the silver to fill the treasury. Wasn't this the best of both worlds? Most importantly, this matter didn't need to be reported. Neither Kai Zhong, who was the middleman, nor Wei Luo, who carefully handed over the silver, would tell anyone about it. However, Mao Mu still reported the matter to him. Wasn't this a sign of loyalty? Mao Mu's indifference towards 20,000 taels of silver proved that he was not greedy. Handing over the money in full proved that the other party was worried about national affairs. Wasn't this kind of loyal and capable eunuch exactly what he needed the most? Speaking of which, Zhu Qizhen's personality was somewhat of a perfectionist. He always wished that the people around him were made of stone, that they could not eat or drink, but they could fight on horseback and rule the country as soon as they dismounted. But where in the world could such a perfect person be found? He used to think that Wang Zhen was such a person, but reality proved that he was wrong. Later on, he believed that Qian Sunbao, Chao Jixiang, and Kai Zhong were such people. However, after some observation, they all had their own shortcomings. Now that Mao Mu had jumped out, he realized that he had found the ideal candidate. Now, he only hated that he hadn't discovered this kind of talent earlier. He had been forced to waste more than 10 years in the palace. Satisfied, he looked at Mao Mu with even more joy. Zhu Qizhen didn't know that Mao Mu was now even more important than Qian Sunbao, who had followed him for more than 10 years. Seeing that Zhu Qizhen was happy, Mao Mu also raised his head with a happy expression. He displayed the joy of a ruler perfectly. Beloved subject, we have seen everything you have done. Do well, and in the future you might be able to become a figure like Zheng He. Zhu Qizhen was truly happy and compared Mao Mu to the 3 treasures eunuchs. Mao Mu naturally knelt down in gratitude and called out, "Long live the emperor!" Afterwards, he took advantage of Zhu Qizhen's happiness to mention that there were still a few officials who hadn't been arrested because their ranks were low. He also said that today's matter shouldn't be spread. Otherwise, if eunuch Kai Zhong found out, he would lose face and appear out of place. It would be difficult to carry out his work in the future. Of course, Zhu Qizhen would follow Mao Mu's instructions. He said that he saw Mao Mu's loyalty and told him to do things without worry. He knew in his heart that he wouldn't let a capable official be wronged. He also said that the war was imminent. Anyone who had problems must be arrested. Even those who suspected problems must be arrested. According to the previous method, they didn't need to be severely punished. He told them to wait and see how he defeated Bugnam of Gojoseon and Yang Qindong. Also, if there were still people who interceded and gave money, he should accept it. The money in the national treasury was getting less and less, and he was eager to replenish it. Zhu Qizhen finally left happily. After Mao Mu helped Empress Qian rest, he left the palace. The palace was forbidden, and it was very difficult for ordinary people to enter and leave the palace. However, with Mao Mu's current status, unless the emperor specifically ordered that no one was allowed to move, it was very easy to leave the palace. After leaving the palace, Mao Mu first brought a few of his eunuchs to the embroidered uniform guard. Coincidentally, Shen Nantang, Wu Ben, Luo Zhu, and the others were all there. He told them about the emperor's decree, which was to take care of the old officials and not let anything happen to them in prison. They could consider giving each of them a single room so that they could come out every day and eat and drink as much as possible. If they didn't have enough money, they could inform their family to send it. Also, from tomorrow onwards, they would continue to arrest people according to the list. Of course, that list was provided by Mao Mu and also by the Yangtze Intelligence Department. They were all capable officials, and what they needed to do now was to catch them all in one fell swoop. In short, it was a sentence that would paralyze the Southern Ming dynasty, break the tacit cooperation between the various departments, and thus reduce the Southern Ming dynasty's fighting strength. Mao Mu's words fell into the ears of the embroidered uniform guard, which was equivalent to an imperial edict. Immediately, everyone bowed their heads and cupped their fists in agreement. After seeing that there was nothing else to do in the embroidered uniform guard, Mao Mu left. Then, seemingly unintentionally, he went to the silk shop that he often went to. Mao Mu didn't know that behind him, Kaigu was quietly following him with a few trusted subordinates. When he saw him enter the embroidered uniform guard, he had been waiting outside. When he saw him come out and didn't immediately return to the palace, he followed him. Mao Mu was still a little inexperienced, and the results he obtained during the day made him a little arrogant. Right now, he was anxious to report all of this to Bugnam of Gojoseon and receive praise and recognition. The few eunuchs around him had received a lot of benefits from Mao Mu. Now that Mao Mu's status had skyrocketed, not only the empress, but even the emperor relied heavily on him. Naturally, they would follow Mao Mu wherever he went. Although the sky was already dark, it wasn't yet time for curfew on the streets. The silk shop's door was still open, and Mao Mu led a few eunuchs inside. Take a good look and see if there are any good satin brocades. Pick out some and send them to the Empress Palace. After some casual instructions, Mao Mu, as usual, was warmly invited by the shopkeeper into the inner room to drink tea. Outside the silk shop, Kai Gu and his people couldn't see what was going on. After all, they knew that the Empress liked satin brocades, and would sometimes make them into finished products for money to support the palace's expenses. Unable to see what was going on or where the problem was, Kaiga decided to sneak into the silk shop and see what Mao Mu was doing. This was his uncle's intention, and he had to obey. As to whether or not it would be dangerous, what a joke! He had learned martial arts from an expert since he was a child. The so-called "the skilled are bold" was used to describe people like him. The people surrounded the silk shop from different directions, and then used what they had learned. They either climbed over the wall or jumped onto the roof to find what Mao Mu was doing at this moment. At this time, Mao Mu was completely unaware of what was happening outside. He was talking to the shopkeeper of the silk shop, who was also the leader of the contact group, about what had happened today. He was going to report it to Yang Qindong in the form of a telegram. Kai Ji's skills were indeed not bad. Although he was tall and sturdy, his body was actually very agile. After a few jumps, he reached the top of the silk shop. Then he lifted the roof tiles one by one, trying to find where Mao Mu was. Finally, after flipping over a few tiles, they saw Mao Mu with his hands behind his back under the light of the coal lamp. He was saying something, and there was someone sitting in front of him. There was something in front of him that they didn't know what it was called, and it was beeping and fiddling with it. Because of his lack of knowledge, Kaiga didn't know what a telegram was, so he wanted to take a closer look. He lowered his head and wanted to take a closer look, but then he felt a pain in his neck, followed by a wave of dizziness, and he fainted. Cold water splashed on Kai Ji's face, and he slowly woke up. He saw Mao Mu sitting in front of him. There were a few big men standing next to him. One of them was like an iron tower, and the muscles all over his body seemed to be about to burst out of his clothes. Based on his intuition, he knew that these people were not to be trifled with. When he thought about how he was knocked unconscious without even feeling it, he was even more certain of the other party's strength. At this moment, he had to be scared. He could only show a trace of a fawning expression and said, "Mr. Mao, all of this is a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding." Mao Mu suddenly stood up, very angry. How dangerous tonight was. If it wasn't for his heavy work, and if it wasn't for the fact that Bugnam of Gojoseon and Yang Qindong had considered this and sent the Wolf Fong special forces to assist him early, he would have suffered a great loss. Not only would his identity be exposed, but the task would also not be completed. In that case, more than 10 years of hiding would be ruined. Although Yang Qindong might not blame him afterwards, he would definitely blame himself. Chapter 1670. He was angry at his own carelessness and also angry at Kai Zhong's ruthlessness. On the surface, Kai Zhong thanked him, but later on he arranged for people to investigate him. He was really a dog that bit, but didn't bark. Feeling that it was about time, Mao Mu knew that he couldn't stay for long. He looked at the big man beside him and said, "Captain Tai, I'll leave everything here to you. This person is the nephew of head eunuch Kaizhong. He must know a lot of secrets." "Don't worry, eunuch Mao." Captain Tai, who was also the captain of the special forces, Taihu grinned. For such an interrogation, their special forces had their own means. Some were taught by Yang Qindong, and some were figured out by themselves. But no matter what, no one who was questioned by them could withstand it. Seeing that Mao Mu was about to leave, Kaigo panicked. He knew that if he really left and handed himself over to the big man, he wouldn't be able to die a good death. So he shouted loudly, "Eunuch Mao, you can't do this to me. I didn't come alone this time. I brought a few subordinates with me. They are all good at martial arts. If I don't go back, they will definitely report to my uncle. Then you will be in trouble." "Oh, are you talking about the 5 people who came with you? That's called good at martial arts. Haha, they're just like you. You don't even know how you were knocked unconscious. How dare you threaten others?" Taihu sneered. Needless to say, if he dared to say that, the other 5 people must have been restrained. Perhaps they were already being tortured. Mao Mu didn't care about this. He strode out of the basement and walked out of the silk shop. He brought the eunuch, who had just picked out the brocade, and went straight to the palace. Mao Mu was back. Kai Zhong also received the news, but he didn't see his nephew. He thought that he stayed in that woman's stomach again, so he didn't pay much attention to it. But until noon the next day, he still didn't see his nephew. He started to get anxious and sent many people to look for him, but there was no useful news. Kai Zhong didn't understand what was going on. He wanted to look for Mao Mu, but he sent people to spy on him. It was uncertain whether Mao Mu knew about it. Even if he knew, would he tell him where Kai Go was? He was the one being unreasonable. Investigate. Even if we have to turn the entire capital upside down, we have to find him. If he's alive, I want to see him. If he's dead, I want to see his corpse. Kai Ji's heart ached when he said this. That was the only heir of the Kai family, and they were counting on him to carry on the family line. Now he couldn't even find him. How was he going to explain this to his dead brother? Mao Mu ignored Kai Ge as if nothing had happened. He continued to do what he was supposed to do. For a time, more and more people were being arrested. At first, it was only the officials of the observer group. Now, some officials who were not part of the observer group were also being arrested. The explanation given by the embroidered uniform guards was that these officials had been bewitched by the observation team's officials, and their hearts had begun to waver. They were unstable people. However, if someone could calm down and think about it, they would realize that those who were arrested were undoubtedly capable or officials who were more competent in their posts. However, at this time, the brocade guard was capturing people everywhere. The officials of the capital were all in danger, so no one had the time to analyze these matters. Right now, they were most afraid that a group of embroidered uniform guards would suddenly come knocking on their door and arrest them. After all, out of the 6 ministers, 4 of them had already been captured. Anything could happen. These officials didn't think that those who were arrested were all capable officials. Instead, they began to analyze how they could avoid being arrested. Kwang Yi was the Grand Tutor of the Crown Prince and also the Minister of War. He was also a member of the observer group. However, since he was expelled, he had already made his stance clear. It was normal for the brocade guard to not make a move on him. Minister Wei Luo was different. He led the officials of the Ministry of Works to participate in the observer group. After returning, he wrote a memorial to the emperor, requesting for more investment in the Ministry of Works, more money to develop weapons, and to raise the status of technical talents in society. These were all things he learned in Qiqian City. In other words, he believed that the Yangtze's industrial and manufacturing capabilities were far superior to the southern Ming dynasties. How could a minister who only praised the Yangtze and belittled the southern Ming dynasty not be arrested? How did he manage to save his own skin? Since someone asked this question, someone else would answer it. Soon, Wei Luo sent 50,000 taels of silver to eunuch Kai Zhong. Kai Zhong acted as the middleman and pleaded with the brocade guards, eunuch Mao Mu. Now that they knew that sending money could guarantee their safety, the officials who hadn't been implicated began to take action. They used various connections to find Qian Xingbao or Kai Zhong, asking them to pass on a message. There were also people who directly went to find Mao Mu and brought large amounts of money. Eunuch Mao Mu, who no one paid attention to at first, quickly became one of the most influential chief eunuchs. His status even surpassed Kai Zhong's and was second only to Qian Xingbao. When large amounts of money and favors were brought to him, Mao Mu didn't let money get to his head. Mao Mu was very clear that he was only where he was today because of Yang Qindong's support. Otherwise, he would still be a nameless eunuch. Perhaps he wouldn't have come to the southern Ming dynasty and would still be in Bai Ming's capital. It was even possible that he would have died in internal strife among the eunuchs. Yang Qindong had given him a new life. Now that Yang Xia was very powerful, it could be imagined that as long as he followed closely, his future would be limitless. His future would definitely be brighter than his current position in the southern Ming dynasty. How could Mao Mu, who had steeled his heart to follow Yang Qindong, care about these silver taels that were delivered to his door? Not only did he not care, he even decided to use these silver taels to make an issue out of it. Thus, he took advantage of an opportunity when Qian Xingbao wasn't on duty and secretly met with Zhu Qijin. While handing over a large amount of silver taels, he also sold off the officials who had sent the money. When the 1.5 million taels of silver taels were placed on the table, Zhu Qijin was shocked. Previously, Wei Luo was a minister and had only sent 20,000 taels of silver taels. However, when he looked at the list that Mao Mu had presented, it showed that a fourth-rank official in the capital had sent 50,000 taels of silver just to buy his own safety. Was it really worth it to pay so much? Furthermore, where did these officials get the money? It was impossible to rely on salary alone, so they could only use power and corruption to get it. When he thought about how there were so many corrupt officials under his command, Zhu Qijin was very angry. He was an idealist and wanted nothing more than to immediately issue an edict to investigate and punish these officials. However, after he calmed down, he still didn't do so. If these officials were punished, who would take care of them for him? He couldn't possibly do everything himself as the emperor, right? Forcefully suppressing the anger in his heart, Zhu Qijin looked at the list in his hand and comforted himself. Fortunately, there are only 30 or so officials here. Reality proves that most of the officials are honest. Originally, this was meant to comfort himself, but he didn't expect that reality would quickly slap him in the face. Mao Mu, who had been waiting there, opened his mouth again and said, "Reporting to your majesty, these are only the officials who came directly to this subject. This is only the first batch. I believe that there will be a second and third batch. Because of this subject status, there aren't many people who came to this subject. The officials who came to find Eunuch Qian and Eunuch Kai are the ones who can be called many. It seems that there are more than 100 of them." What? Zhu Qijin, who had just sat down, couldn't help but tilt his body. He almost lost his seat and slipped onto the dragon throne. Fortunately, he reached out his hands in time and stabilized his body. However, he was already unable to vent his anger. Could it be that my officials already don't know what it means to be clean and honest? Your Majesty, please quell your anger. Seeing Zhu Qijin's angry dragon face, Mao Mu knew that he had to pour some water on him to calm his anger. Even if it wasn't for others, even if it was for Yang Qindong's grand plan, he had to do this. He couldn't really have Zhu Qijin kill all of these officials who had sent gifts, right? If that really happened, not only would Zhu Qijin not kill them, he would also have to reflect on whether it was right to have the embroidered, uniformed guards arrest them. If that really happened, the grand plan to weaken the southern Ming Empire before the war would be interrupted. This was something that Mao Mu definitely didn't want to see. After mulling over what to say, Mao Mu opened his mouth and said, "Your Majesty, in reality, This is just everyone feeling insecure. According to this subject's knowledge, some officials, in order to save their lives and gather money, even sold their ancestral property just to gather enough money to save their lives. This is enough to show that there are still quite a few honest officials who are serving the country. It's just the general trend. This subject thinks that we might have pushed them too far. Therefore, this subject believes that we should arrest those who have problems and just take the money from those who don't have problems and add it to the country's treasury. This way, those officials who have no money and have nothing to do will definitely do their best to be loyal to Your Majesty. They already have no capital and have no other choice but to wholeheartedly serve the country. Your Majesty. Amen. When Zhu Qijin heard this, the anger on his face faded a lot. That's right. Beloved Official Mao's words are reasonable. Since that's the case, we will allow it. They could continue to find problematic officials and stabilize the court so that they wouldn't be frightened by Yang Xie before the war. They could also collect a large sum of money for the court's use. It would be strange if Zhu Qijin didn't agree to such a result. Seeing that Zhu Qijin had agreed, Mao Mu immediately praised the emperor for his wisdom. He then said, Your Majesty, it's true that this subject's method is good, but this subject will inevitably offend Eunuch Qian and Eunuch Kai. If they complain to Your Majesty, I'm afraid this subject's shoulders aren't wide enough and hard enough. It's fine. Beloved official, you do things wholeheartedly for the country. We know this. Just do it boldly. On the other hand, they dared to keep a portion of the money in their hands, even though it was clearly given by the officials. We are already benevolent for not finding fault with them. Zhu Qijin waved his hand magnanimously. He increasingly found that Mao Mu was a subject who wholeheartedly served the country and was wholeheartedly loyal to him. He wasn't greedy and didn't take the money. He handed over as much money as the officials gave him. Just this point alone made him much better than the others. Chapter 1671. Take that Kai Zhong, for example. Wei Luo had given him 50,000 taels of silver, but he had only given Mao Mu 20,000 taels of silver. He had actually pocketed more than half of it, much to Zhu Qijin's displeasure. With these 30,000 taels of silver, the imperial court could do a few more things, could it not? Mao Mu had been waiting for Zhu Qijin to say this. This way, his position would be secure. He immediately kowtowed again, praising the emperor's wisdom. Crimson City. Yang Qindong had already returned. He had spent 3 days on the sea and learned that Yang Xie was very stable. Even though he had not appeared and his safety was unknown, under the leadership of the Crown Prince Yang Bo, everyone was carrying out their duties. The only difference was that there were many more ships on the sea. They were the search party, used to search for Yang Qindong. Yang Xie's situation was stable, and Yang Qindong was very satisfied with this result. He decided to return to Crimson City. Since his son had passed the test, and the officials of Yang Xie had also passed the test, there was no need for him to hide. After all, there were still many important things to do. Yang Qindong's reappearance on the docks of Crimson City naturally drew cheers from the officials of Yang Xie. Yang Xie had been created by Yang Qindong, and he was the backbone of everyone. In this aspect, Yang Bo could not compare. But after this incident, Yang Qindong could see that Yang Bo was a promising talent. He had decided to slowly hand over his authority so that he could train Yang Bo. Not only him, his descendants would have to do the same, and that was to hand over power while they were still alive. Speaking of which, in history, the change of dynasties was the easiest time to cause problems. When an old emperor passed away and a new emperor ascended the throne, a single mistake would result in a rain of blood and a sea of heads falling to the ground. When one's strength was severely damaged, it would often take a long time for one to recover. And at this time the new emperor was old, and it wouldn't be long before the old and the new were replaced, causing more heads to fall to the ground. How could one prevent this from happening? Yang Qindong's idea was to transfer his power to the old emperor while he was still alive, becoming the retired emperor. Of course, there were drawbacks to doing this. For example, how could two tigers live on the same mountain? If the two emperors didn't like each other, wouldn't there be internal strife? For this reason, Yang Qindong had thought of a solution. For example, before the old emperor passed away, he could retain a portion of his military power. If there was a major incident, he could skip the command of the new emperor, and so on. This should be enough to protect himself. Of course, this was still an immature idea. More importantly, Yang Qindong believed that by doing this, they could avoid the problems that would arise when the two emperors were replaced. Otherwise, it would be like Kangxi's edict of succession in history. One said that the throne would be passed to the 14th elder brother, while the other said that the throne would be passed to the 4th elder brother. Even until now, there were still many opinions. Yang Qindong returned to Qiqian City, and the Beiming Imperial Court's observation group also set off. The Tianjin guard boarded the ship and headed straight for Qiqian City. On this point, Zhu Qijin and Zhu Qiyu both had the same idea, which was to know oneself and know one's enemy to win 100 battles. Perhaps they both knew that the battle with Yang Xie was unavoidable, so it was naturally a good thing to know about it in advance. As for the observation group, the two emperors gave great support. Different from the last time, Yang Qindong personally came to welcome the Southern Ming observation group. Moreover, he brought his wife, Queen Huyan, to the docks. It was because Huyan's relatives were in the Beiming observation group. This time her grandfather, Hu Shao, was in the observation group. It had to be said that the lifespan of people in this era wasn't very long. There were many people who died in their 40s, and there were even some who died in their 30s. However, most of them were ordinary people who couldn't eat well and couldn't afford to wear clothes. Those officials were not included. Not only that, but there were also some people who lived very long lives. For example, Huyan's grandfather, Hu Shao, was one of them. In history, he lived for a full 85 years. Because of Yang Qindong's arrival, he unexpectedly broke through this age limit. Now he was already 92 years old. It was said that his body was still quite good. At the very least, he could still walk with the support of others and didn't collapse on the bed. Hu Shao could be said to be the oldest among the officials. Adding on the fact that he had entered politics at a young age, he could already be considered an old official of 4 dynasties. This time, when he found out that there was an opportunity to enter Qiqian City, he took the initiative to apply to the emperor. When Zhu Qiyu had already collapsed on the bed, his body gradually weakening, Crown Prince Zhu Jianji considered that Hu Shao was already quite old. Even if he stayed in Beiming, he wouldn't be able to become an official, so he agreed to his application. However, he made it clear that only Hu Shao from the Hu family could go. The others could join the observation group. From this, it could be seen that Zhu Jianji was still quite wary of Yang Qindong. Leaving the Hu family behind was also a method to keep him in check. Speaking of this Zhu Jianji in history, he died prematurely at the age of 7. It was also because of his relationship with Yang Qindong that he took out Western medicine to save his life. Now he was already a young man of 20 years old. Since her grandfather had come, as his granddaughter, Huyan naturally had to come out to greet him. Considering the special nature of Hu Zhao's identity and his age, Yang Qindong also came along. Huyan was so moved that she broke into tears. Yang Qindong and the queen both came out to greet them, causing the people on the docks to gather together and become even more magnificent. When they saw a ship coming from afar, someone on the docks had already reported it. At this moment, Huyan tightly grabbed Yang Qindong's arm, appearing very excited. 1 year had passed just like that. Finally, she could see her family again. The excitement in Huyan's heart could be imagined. Yang Qindong naturally didn't feel any excitement. Not only did Zhu Jianji not allow Huyan's parents to come with the observation group, even his brothers and sisters weren't allowed to join the observation group. In other words, the Yang family was still in Beiming's capital. Although Yang Qindong had already made arrangements for them to not put their lives in danger or make their lives difficult, it was still somewhat regretful that they couldn't see them. As for Bai Ming, Yang Qindong's plan was even bigger. Whether it was in the imperial court or in the army, he had arranged his own chess pieces, and their status wasn't low. As long as the time was right, they could launch a counterattack at any time. However, Yang Qindong didn't make a move. He was waiting for the day when Zhu Qiyu died. At that time, the young emperor, Zhu Jinji, would need some time to take control of the imperial court. At that time, Yang Xie's army would attack. Zhu Qiyu was ordered to be in danger, and with Yang Qindong's help, he was able to turn the tide. These years, he had worked hard for the country and had a lot of prestige. At the very least, Bai Ming could be united with him as the core. Once he was gone, with his useless son, the unity of the country would only be on the surface. He needed to wait for the right time to attack Bai Ming, but he didn't need to be so polite to the southern Ming. With Zhu Qijin's imperial edict in Chao Jixiang's hands, Yang Qindong had enough reason to attack the southern Ming. The only reason he hadn't made a move now was because the military supplies weren't in place yet. Now it seemed that this was the time. When he thought about attacking the southern Ming, Yang Qindong couldn't help but think of Mao Mu. This chess piece that he had arranged many years ago had finally come into play, and its power was far greater than he had imagined. Before the battle, the southern Ming already had internal strife. The people's hearts weren't united, and everyone was in danger. Once Yang Xie's army arrived, the result could be imagined. This made Yang Qindong very satisfied with Mao Mu. At this time, Mao Mu was still busy at Yingtian Manor in the capital. Whether it was Qian Xingbao or Kai Zhong, they didn't know that Mao Mu had secretly met with the emperor and handed over the ransom money he received. They were still using this opportunity to make a big profit. This was especially true for Qian Xingbao. Relying on his identity as the one who supported Mao Mu, he didn't give Mao Mu a single tael of silver. He only handed over the list of officials that he wanted to protect, saying that they were all his people. So he had to be magnanimous. Under Qian Sengbao's forceful attitude, Mao Mu chose to continue to endure. At the same time, he made a detailed report to Zhu Qijin. In his own words, the reason why he could be where he was today was all because of the emperor's great kindness. He only listened to the emperor. As for other people, no matter how great their kindness was to him, he would at most help them within his authority. However, when it came to imperial power, he would still choose to listen to the emperor without hesitation. When Zhu Qijin heard Mao Mu's confession, he was very happy. He praised Mao Mu as the most loyal official in the current court and told him to be at ease. Zhu Qijin valued Mao Mu more and more. He began to have opinions about Qian Xingbao. This man, he was always afraid of being compared to others. With this comparison, it was clear who was stronger and who was weaker. Qian Xingbao, who seemed to be good at everything in the past, now made Zhu Qijin feel dissatisfied with everything he did. He even thought about whether or not he should let Mao Mu replace him. Compared to Qian Sengbao's bossy attitude, Kai Zhong was more restrained. At the very least, he would give a portion of the benefits to Mao Mu. However, no matter what he did, he had already entered Mao Mu's death list. This was not only because Kai Zhong had sent his nephew Kai Gu to follow him. More importantly, he had reached out to the disciplined prison of the Embroidered Uniform Guard. He had bribed the Embroidered Uniform Guard's jailers to meet Chao Jixiang's nephew, Chao Exan, who was the son of the former Embroidered Uniform Guard commander Chao Zheng. He wanted to use him for his own purposes. In the Chao family, other than Chao Jixiang, there was also Chao Exan. It was Chao Exan who had led people to ambush Yang Qindong in Bai Ming. It was just that they had not succeeded. Kai Zhong had found this person as a helper. It was clear that he had good taste. However, he had angered Mao Mu. Not to mention that the Chao family was now Mao Mu's mortal enemy. Once he ransomed Chao Exan, it would directly threaten his own safety. Just the fact that Chao Xian had once ambushed Yang Qindong made it impossible to let him live. Chapter 1672. The reason why Chao Xian was still alive in the Discipline Commission of the Embroidered Uniform Guard was because Mao Mu wanted to personally hand him over to Yang Qindong. But since Kai Zhong wanted to do this, he had to make a move in advance. First, he sent a telegram to Yang Qindong to ask if he could kill Chao Xian now. Then he found eunuch Qian Xingbao and explained what Kai Zhong would do next. Once Chao Xian was released, he would be the first to come after him. Next, he would not let Qian Xingbao go. Qian Xingbao was not an ordinary eunuch. Although he was not a man, he still had a residence outside the palace for his face. Not only that, but he also kept a few beauties in his residence. Although he could not do anything, he could still let them pour him tea and massage his legs during his break. That was also a kind of enjoyment. Once Chao Xian was released, who knew whether or not he would ambush him outside the residence for revenge. This was someone who even dared to ambush Bugnam of Gojoseon. Thinking of this, Qian Sengbao's face revealed a fierce gaze. Kill him now. But this person is wanted by eunuch Kai Zhong. Mao Mu pretended to be in a difficult position. No matter, I will talk to him. In short, we have to nip any danger in the bud. Qian Sengbao's voice carried a sinister intent. Now, he had borrowed Mao Mu's name to get a lot of money. He wanted to enjoy his life and did not want anyone to threaten his safety. Understood. Mao Mu nodded and agreed. What happened next was simple. After dinner, Chao Xian died in the discipline prison. When the news reached Kai Zhong's ears, he was naturally furious. Even if he closed his eyes and used his toes to think, he knew that this was Mao Mu's doing. Do you really think your wings are strong? Gritting his teeth, the angry Kai Zhong decided to unite more eunuchs to deal with Mao Mu. There were 24 eunuchs in the entire group of eunuchs. Each eunuch had a chief eunuch, and 1/3 of them listened to him. Once they joined forces, Mao Mu would have a hard time in the palace. Scheming against scheming against scheming. There would always be countless sinister methods. Most of the time, such methods could even take a person's life. For example, if the eunuch in charge of the food shop wanted to make things difficult for Mao Mu, then in the entire empress palace, other than the master, the food that the other eunuchs and palace maids ate was either too salty to swallow or too bitter to curse. In addition, there would be various problems with the use of the eunuchs and palace maids. In this way, it wouldn't be long before all the eunuchs and palace maids in the empress palace hated Mao Mu. If that was the case, who would listen to him? When the problem affected the master, Mao Mu would fall out of favor and even be replaced. After all, Kai Zhong had been in business for so many years. He had many loyal followers in the 24 prisons. Once he made up his mind to deal with someone, the consequences would be very serious. At this time, Kai Zhong had already begun to imagine Mao Mu begging him. At that time, he would use his actions to tell the other party that he was not someone to be trifled with. Unfortunately, just as Kai Zhong gathered the eunuchs who listened to his orders, Qian Xingbao sent someone to deliver a message. The general idea was that Mao Mu was now a favorite of the emperor and was doing something important. If anyone wanted to find trouble with him, they would be going against the emperor. As the chief eunuch, he would have to punish those who didn't open their eyes according to the family rules. Qian Xingbao gave a very good reason, so everyone knew that Mao Mu was now the director of the Embroidered Uniform Guard and was arresting people every day. From time to time, the emperor would call him for questioning. With such an excuse, it made things difficult for the other eunuchs. In addition, Mao Mu wasn't idle during this period of time. He used money to open a path and really roped in 3 chief eunuchs. When he and Qian Xingbao combined their power, they suppressed Kai Zhong. Just like that, a plot against them in the dark ended before it could even begin to take action. Kai Zhong, who was covered in dirt, lost his prestige in the entire group of eunuchs because of this. Many people had already begun to wonder if they should change their allegiance. In ancient times, people paid attention to heaven, earth, ruler, family, and teacher. Often, they wouldn't change their allegiance for the rest of their lives. Many people's orders would even change according to the fate of their teacher. But to the eunuchs, this was bullshit. They were a group of people who changed their helm according to the wind. When you were in power, they couldn't wait to become lapdogs to flatter you. On the other hand, when you were in power, people who didn't know you would step on you in order to vent their resentment of a man who was no longer a normal man. Feeling the change in the other chief eunuchs, Kai Zhong became anxious. He knew that if he didn't do anything, what awaited him would be the eunuchs being disloyal to him. In the end, he was afraid that he would be abandoned by everyone and wouldn't be able to die a good death even if he wanted to. In for a penny, in for a pound. Since these chief eunuchs were unreliable, Kai Zhong used his authority to mobilize soldiers and horses to begin to obstruct the embroidered uniform guard from handling the case. The imperial horse supervisor was in charge of the imperial stable and the commander's seal, so he had his own private army. It was just that the number of people was small. Under normal circumstances, without a decree, they didn't dare to mobilize privately. But this time, in order to stifle Mao Mu's development and show his strength, Kai Zhong couldn't care less. Mao Mu didn't think that Kai Zhong would be so daring as to mobilize the imperial horse supervisor's men without a decree. For a while, many of the embroidered uniform guard who had been sent out to capture people came back, saying that they had encountered difficulties. The people they wanted to capture were protected and they couldn't act without orders. Mao Mu was worried that he wouldn't have any evidence to use against him. After hearing the reports from his subordinates, he went straight to the Qinzheng Hall where the emperor worked. Today, Qian Sanbao was on duty. He was standing beside Zhu Qijin, waiting on the emperor to read memorials. A young eunuch came to report that eunuch Mao had come. "Let him in," Zhu Qijin said without raising his head, but he quickly stopped writing. He wondered if Mao Mu had come to give him money. Did he need to send Qian Sanbao away? After all, this great companion wasn't bad. The only thing was that he was a bit greedy. He had always wanted the other party to take the initiative to hand over the money he had embezzled. Unfortunately, he hadn't seen any movement. If Mao Mu really came to give him money and he saw it, what would he do? Even if he handed over the money at that time, it would be equivalent to being forced. It wouldn't be considered taking the initiative to admit his mistake. While Zhu Qijin was still thinking about these things, Mao Mu had already walked into the main hall. Then, with a plop, he knelt on the ground and said with an aggrieved expression, "Long live the emperor! Beloved official, why do you have to be so courteous? Is something the matter?" Zhu Qijin's face carried a trace of surprise. Although the great Ming dynasty had a ceremony of kneeling, it wasn't done every time they saw the emperor. It was only done when they were particularly excited or angry. Zhu Qijin felt that something was wrong, so he asked this question. Using this question, Mao Mu raised his head and said, "Emperor, the embroidered uniform guard received orders to arrest people. Although there have been more arrests recently, they are all suspicious. There are also some people who have solid evidence and can be punished at any time. But I don't know why the emperor suddenly stopped arresting people and didn't give this official a decree. Right now, this official really doesn't know what to do." Zhu Qijin was dumbfounded by these words. What stopped arresting people? He didn't give such a decree. Out of curiosity, he asked, "Beloved official, what is going on? Tell me in detail." Yes. Looking at Zhu Qijin's confused expression, Mao Mu knew that this was done by Kai Zhong on his own. Since this was the case, this matter was easy to handle. This time, the other party definitely wouldn't be able to bear the consequences. Although he couldn't rely on this matter to defeat the other party, he could at least suppress the other party's momentum and let more eunuchs see who was the sturdier one. Don't underestimate this influence. When it came to the ability to take advantage of the situation, if eunuchs said they were second, no one would dare to say they were first. Mao Mu immediately told him about the problems the embroidered uniform guards encountered when they went out to investigate and arrest people. According to the soldiers who obstructed them, it was an order from the Imperial Horse Supervisor. Now, the embroidered uniform guards can't do their job as scheduled. Some of the officials' attitudes have even become arrogant. On one hand, they say that the Yangtze is stronger than the Southern Ming. On the other hand, they also say that the Southern Ming court is wrong and the embroidered uniform guards are incompetent. They say that they can't even unify the government. How can such a country talk about winning wars? Enough! Zhu Qijin, who was sitting on the dragon throne, was angry. Of course, this anger wasn't directed at Mao Mu. He hated Kai Zhong for not being able to accomplish anything, but more than enough to spoil things. He actually tried to tear down his own people. It was truly infuriating to hear. Seeing that Zhu Qijin was angry, Mao Mu tactfully shut his mouth. However, he didn't forget to look at Qian Xingbao, who was standing to the side. Qian Xingbao understood the meaning behind Zhu Qijin's gaze and knew that it was time for him to make an appearance. He nodded lightly and said, "Your Majesty, it must be said that eunuch Kai has been a little arrogant recently. He relied on the little bit of merit he made in the past and didn't put anyone in his eyes. Especially recently, I heard that many officials have already sought him out. There are even quite a few who want to acknowledge him as their godfather. Hee, how laughable is it when you think about it? A scholar actually wants to acknowledge Kai Zhong, who is illiterate, as his godfather. If this trend isn't properly suppressed, I'm afraid that there will be trouble in the end. It might even lead to a conflict between factions. This subject is thinking that there won't be a day when these officials won't even look at imperial edicts. They won't know who your Majesty is and will have to act according to his wishes." Qian Sengbao's words weren't just sprinkling salt on the wound. He was clearly stabbing it with a knife. Moreover, he was stabbing it again and again, as if he wanted to chop the flesh into pieces. What Zhu Qijin disliked the most and was most apprehensive about was fighting between factions. It wasn't just him. Any emperor would be displeased. Chapter 1673. Once there was a factional conflict, not only would it cause chaos in the court, it would also create an awkward situation where the emperor could not leave the palace. Since ancient times, whenever there was a sign of such a conflict, it would be severely suppressed. Many times, the result of such suppression was the loss of the emperor's power and the weakening of the country. With so many examples from the past, how could Zhu Qijin tolerate it? He immediately slammed the table and said, "Great companion, please write a decree to remove Kai Zhong from the position of Imperial Horse Supervisor." For the time being, when he said this, Zhu Qijin first looked at Mao Mu, then shook his head slightly and said, "Great companion, you will take over." Mao Mu had not been in power for long, and he was busy with the matters of the embroidered uniform guard. Zhu Qijin thought about it and did not give him more responsibilities, so this task fell to Qian Xingbao. No one would complain about not having enough power. When Zhu Qijin issued this decree, Qian Xingbao was so happy that he immediately knelt and thanked the emperor. Mao Mu left with satisfaction. When he left, Qian Xingbao took the initiative to send him off. The smile on his face was enough to squeeze all the mosquitoes that dared to provoke him. It could be seen how happy he was. Before Mao Mu rose to power, although Qian Xingbao was the chief eunuch, he had Chao Jixiang and Kai Zhong, the two supervisors of power under him. Most of the time, they wouldn't even give him face. Compared to Wang Zhen, who was the emperor's first companion in the past, he was far inferior. In the end, Qian Xingbao was forced to work around the emperor and look after his own affairs. Now, after Mao Mu came to power, he received money and power. If he continued to work hard, there would be a day when he would become the second Wang Zhen. How could Qian Xingbao not be happy? When he saw Mao Mu, how could he not have a smile on his face? Mao Mu was very modest. although in his plan, this Qian Sungbao had to be taken down. But the meal had to be eaten bite by bite. He immediately smiled and said, "All of this is because Qian Xingbao has the emperor's heart. It should have been like this long ago. Qian Xingbao has been careful and conscientious by the emperor's side all these years. Now, you are only a eunuch of the imperial horse supervisor, which is very normal." That's right, Kai Zhong had been in the imperial horse directorate for many years, so he must have quite a few trusted aides. Eunuch Qian still had to display his ruthless methods on this trip. He absolutely could not give the other party a chance to rise from the ashes. If one day His Majesty remembers the other party's good points and uses him again, then he will definitely take revenge for what happened today. The congratulations from before were just pleasantries. The reminder at the end was the most important. Mao Mu wanted to see Qian Xingbao and Kai Zhong fight each other so that he could reap the benefits like a fisherman. Don't worry, this duke is very capable. As Qian Xingbao spoke, his eyes had already narrowed into slits. Thinking about it, it made sense. For an old fox like him who was used to seeing eunuchs fighting for benefits. Once he made a move, Kai Zhong would definitely not be able to stand it. Presumably, those eunuchs who belonged to him would also face the danger of being uprooted. Mao Mu left happily. Now that he had achieved his goal and no one was holding him back, he had to speed up the brocade guard's work. Once he captured all the capable officials in the capital, he would make a move on the local officials in the provinces. When he wanted Yang Xie's army to pave the way, no one would dare to stand in his way. Qian Sungbao did not disappoint. Soon after, he took the imperial edict written by Zhu Qijin and went to the imperial horse directorate. From then on, Kai Zhong became one of the chief eunuchs with no power. The ferocity of the situation was completely out of Kai Zhong's expectations. He was still waiting for Mao Mu to come and beg for mercy. Who would have thought that Mao Mu would ignore him and directly report the matter to His Majesty? His Majesty even listened to Mao Mu's words and directly punished Kai Zhong. Although he did not do anything to Kai Zhong, when he was stripped of his power, it was like taking away half his life. What made Kai Zhong even angrier was Qian Sengbao's actions. In just half a day's time, the entire imperial horse directorate had been replaced. Those who were loyal to him had been demoted to other directorates and had been demoted from eunuchs with real power to minor eunuchs. Based on the history of internal strife among eunuchs, it was needless to say that after being demoted from a high and mighty position, what awaited them would be worse than death. It would definitely be a fate worse than death. Because of this, even if there was a day when His Majesty remembered him again and ordered him to return to the Imperial Horse Directorate, it would take a lot of time for him to raise a group of people again. Kai Zhong was still Kai Zhong. He would not resign himself to death like this. He had to retaliate. He was already thinking of what to say. He wanted to see His Majesty and complain to His Majesty. Based on his past achievements, he believed that as long as His Majesty remembered their old friendship, he would be able to rise again. The next morning, after Zhu Qijin had a court meeting, he learned that Qian Xingbao was not at the emperor's side and had instead gone to the Imperial Horse Directorate. Kai Zhong directly went to visit and had one of his trusted eunuchs by the emperor's side report that he wanted to see the emperor. That day, Zhu Qijin was in a very bad mood. He found that the number of people in the imperial court, which was held once every 3 days, had decreased by a lot. In order to maintain the operations of the imperial court, he had no choice but to quickly promote officials. However, when he thought about how many of the officials were still inexperienced and were still young, it was still unknown whether they could take charge of the various yamens and make the huge machine that was the Southern Ming Empire operate normally. Just as he was in a bad mood, he looked at the list of officials to be promoted sent by the Ministry of Appointments. When he saw that there were many names that he had not heard of before, his brows furrowed again and again. The emperor managed the officials managed the small officials managed the small officials, and the small officials managed the common people. This was the basic structure of a country. The emperor only needed to win over the hearts of the officials, and it was the same as controlling the world. However, when he had not heard of the names of the officials, could the emperor still manage them well? Would they be able to work with him and deal with the affairs of the state? At this moment, Zhu Qizhen's heart could not help but waver. Should he release the officials that the embroidered uniform guard had captured? This was just a thought, and he quickly rejected it. It was not for any other reason, but because these were all problematic officials. Once they were released and regained power, what would happen if these people no longer supported the Southern Ming Empire and instead supported the Yangxia Empire? Wouldn't that be the same as helping the enemy? Forget it. I hope that these new officials can quickly grow up. As he comforted himself like this, a eunuch came to report that eunuch Kaizhong was outside the hall and was requesting an audience. Knowing why Kaizhong was here, Zhu Qizhen originally did not want to see him. However, considering that he had been performing well and was considered loyal, he did not want to give him too much heart. Thinking about it, it was better not to disappoint the other party. He still had to comfort him and let him reflect on it. If there was a chance, he could use him again. It had to be said that Zhu Qizhen had indeed become the role model of the emperor when it came to the tolerance of eunuchs. Although some emperors also trusted eunuchs, there had never been anyone like Zhu Qizhen who, after suffering a big loss, taking a big tumble, and even dividing the great Ming dynasty into the north and the south, still did not know how to repent. Kaizhong had grasped Zhu Qizhen's mentality and dared to take the initiative to request an audience. If it were any other eunuch, they would probably hide as far away as they could at this moment. After Kaizhong received permission, he entered the hall. As soon as he entered the hall, he knelt on the ground with a plop. Following that, his face was covered in tears. First, he stated that after dividing the great Ming dynasty between the north and the south, he had traveled from the northern Ming dynasty to the southern Ming dynasty without hesitation. He had traveled thousands of miles just to seek refuge with the emperor. This was because he believed that the emperor was the sacred lord and definitely could not be compared to the despicable Zhu Qiu. After coming to Yingtian Prefecture, he also worked conscientiously. When he saw the southern Ming Empire under Zhu Qizhen's rule, he was overjoyed and so on, and the southern Ming Empire's strength increased greatly. These were all to show off his achievements and flatter Zhu Qizhen in disguise. This was also a trick that Kaizhong often used. This trick was indeed effective. Zhu Qizhen sat on the dragon throne with a satisfied expression on his face. This was a person who was conquered by his charisma. This was enough to prove that he was more suitable to be the emperor than Zhu Qiu. Seeing that Zhu Qizhen's mood had improved, Kaizhong began to complain tearfully. He said that Qian Xingbao and Mao Mu had joined forces to deal with him and that they could not bear to see others better than them. The reason why he used the power of the Imperial Horse Supervisor was to check and balance the power of the Imperial Horse Supervisor. It was true that the Imperial Horse Guards had arrested too many officials recently, and many of them did not have any problems. It was only because they joined the observation group and saw how powerful Yangxia was that they came back and complained a little. Besides, the observation group was decided by the emperor. How could there be a mistake? It would have been better if Kaizhong did not mention this. When he mentioned this, Zhu Qizhen's expression changed. Speaking of which, there were 3 things that Zhu Qizhen regretted the most in his life. First, he should not have listened to Wang Zhen's words and personally led the army. This led to the defeat of the Timu fortress and divided the great Ming Empire into the northern and southern Ming empires. Second, he should not have let Yang Qindong leave. If he had kept Yang Xie by his side and used his ability to help him, all of Yang Xie's achievements would have been his. This point was somewhat taken for granted. If he had kept Yang Qindong, it would be hard to say if he would have been able to put him in an important position or if he would have listened to him. After all, if an official's ability was too strong, the emperor would always be afraid of him. Over time, once the official's achievements were too great, he would be killed. Third, the matter of establishing the observation group. Originally, he wanted to see how the other party was developing so that he could know himself and the enemy. If possible, he wanted to learn from the other party's advanced things. However, he did not expect that Yang Xie was too powerful. The members of the observation group actually developed a mentality of fear and brought this atmosphere back to the capital. As a result, the expressions of the officials below changed. Before the war had even begun, everyone was already in a state of panic. The theory of failure had become a mainstream. This was why he had no choice but to use the Imperial Horse Guards to suppress this matter. Chapter 1674. Zhu Qijin wished that no one would mention such a regretful thing, but Kaizhong took the initiative to mention it. Listening to him, he was the one who sent the observation group. Even if there was a problem, he should be responsible. This could be considered as provoking his anger. Without waiting for Kaizhong to continue, Zhu Qijin asked angrily, "What do you mean many officials have no problem? Do you mean they gave you money, so there's no problem?" Kaizhong, who was talking nonstop, was suddenly interrupted and then asked such a question. For a moment he was stunned and shocked. He didn't expect the emperor to know about this matter. More importantly, the emperor actually made this matter public. Normally, even if the emperor knew about some things, he would not say it publicly. He would only give a limited reminder. This was the scheming of an emperor. If he did not say anything clearly, he would let his subordinates think about it themselves. Often, this would have a greater effect of intimidating people. For a long time, Zhu Qijin had done this. It indeed had a very good deterrent effect, so that the officials were a little afraid of the emperor. But what did it mean to say it publicly? Was he going to turn hostile? Perhaps it was because Kaizhong had followed Zhu Qijin for too long and had always received the emperor's favor that he had begun to forget his own identity. He didn't think about it. He was just a eunuch, and he thought that the emperor would fall out with him. It would only take a few words to punish him. What was so difficult about that? At first he was stunned. He was a little stunned by Zhu Qijin's words. After he quickly reacted, his face suddenly changed and he broke out in a cold sweat. He knew that if he didn't make things clear today, not only would the emperor make a decision for him, he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to make a comeback in the future. At that moment, Kaizhong knelt on the ground with a plop and repeatedly admitted to being guilty. When he raised his head, he said, "Your Majesty, this official was protecting those officials. And Mao Mu also had a part in this matter. The money that those officials sent ended up in his hands, Your Majesty." He had no choice but to accuse Mao Mu. In Kaizhong's opinion, there weren't many people by the emperor's side now. Mao Mu was very favored now. If he could pull this person in, presumably, even if it was for Mao Mu's face, this matter would be reduced to a small matter. As long as he could get through this, he would keep a low profile for a while. When the time was right, he would rise again. He thought that he found a scapegoat and Zhu Qijin would let him off. Eunuchs also had to do things. He couldn't arrest everyone. However, Kaizhong didn't know that Mao Mu had already prepared for that. The money that Kaizhong gave Mao Mu had already been sent to the emperor. To be honest, Mao Mu didn't lack money, or Yang Qindong didn't lack money at all. Not to mention the money that was given to Zhu Qijin. Once the southern Ming Empire became a part of the Yang faction, this money would eventually return to their pockets. When Kaizhong was still thinking that Zhu Qijin would let him go, a roar was heard. "You still have the nerve to talk about money. How much did you embezzle? Tell me." Zhu Qijin was really angry. Kaizhong first blindly mentioned the observation group and exposed his scar. Then he didn't repent and wanted to get Mao Mu off the horse. Did he really think that he had a good temper? Did he really think that he didn't dare to teach him a lesson? Yes, Zhu Qijin liked Kaizhong very much. Previously, this person was able to come to Intian Prefecture from Baiming, which also proved his loyalty to him. However, to become a suitable subject, loyalty wasn't enough. He also needed to be capable. Not only was he incapable, but he was also very greedy. When he encountered a problem, he didn't want to admit his mistakes. He even wanted to get others off the horse to achieve his goal of making him hesitate. Such a person couldn't be easily forgiven. This. Zhu Qijin's reaction was completely out of Kai Zhong's expectations. He didn't expect that he would directly ask how much money he had received. Based on his experience of serving Zhu Qijin all these years, since he asked this question, he must have an answer. When he thought of the punishment of the great Ming dynasty for corrupt officials, Kai Zhong was afraid. He kowtowed to the ground and said, "Your Majesty, this subject is guilty, this subject is guilty." But Mao Mu really accepted this subject's money. At this time, Kai Zhong still wanted to get Mao Mu off the horse to share his mistake. If he really admitted his mistake, perhaps Zhu Qijin would really spare him for the sake of his loyalty. At most, he wouldn't put him in an important position in the future. Speaking of which, Zhu Qijin's use of eunuchs was definitely the highest in history. However, at this time, Kai Zhong still wanted to find a scapegoat. How was this admitting his mistake? It was clearly sophistry. Zhu Qijin was completely disappointed now. He shook his head, and his voice suddenly became much calmer. "Minister Mao Mu has already presented the money you gave him to me. You still dare to accuse a loyal subject. You really disappoint me." Kai Zhong once again let out a unique, duck-like shriek. Then he fell to his knees on the ground as if there were no bones in his body to support him. He didn't expect Mao Mu to do this. Didn't that mean he had already sold him? He even used this as an excuse to escape punishment. He really didn't know how the word death was written. A eunuch was a eunuch. No matter how strong he was, a word from the emperor would just turn him into ashes. Kai Zhong was taken away by the burly general outside the hall. When he left, he didn't beg for mercy because he knew how miserable his fate would be. At this moment, saying anything would be futile. When Mao Mu heard of this matter, it was already 2 hours later. His expression didn't change, but he was a little excited. Chao Jixiang and Kai Zhong were finished like this. Should it be Qian Seng's turn to protect them next? Thinking of this, Mao Mu felt that he should do something. Compared to Mao Mu's calmness, Qian Seng Bao was laughing to his heart's content. After all these years, he finally felt like he was in control of the entire group of eunuchs. There were no competitors, and Mao Mu listened to him. In the future, wouldn't he be able to do whatever he wanted? Once he completely integrated this power, he would hear in front of the emperor that was beneficial to him. In this way, no one would shake his foundation. He would become the second Wang Jin. No, when Wang Zhen was here, there were other eunuchs who shared power. If he did it well, he could be more impressive than Wang Jin. Qian Seng Bao, who was in a good mood, quickly received good news. Many officials came to find him, especially some officials from other provinces. After the embroidered uniform guards target moved from the capital to other provinces, officials near the capital began to be arrested. These people, in order to protect themselves, found Qian Seng Bao through the guidance of other officials. After all, Mao Mu didn't accept money. When he met the officials, he always had a cold face, giving people a feeling that he was unapproachable. Kai Zhong was completely taken down, so they had no other choice but to find Qian Seng Bao. More and more officials came to see him, and the amount of money they gave him also increased. In a short 3 days, he received 3 million taels of silver. This showed how rich the officials were. It also showed that the money in their hands was far more than what they got from their salaries. Qian Seng Bao also had a good appetite. He would give a reply according to the amount of money sent to him. If they sent a small amount, he would naturally be perfunctory. If they sent a large amount, he would clearly say that he would protect them. If they sent a large amount, he would take time to meet them directly and comfort them. In a short time, Qian Seng Bao became the second parent of many officials. Praises came one after another. Following these officials' words, Eunuch Qian was their life-saving straw. He was their biggest backer. This kind of action naturally attracted the resistance of some self-proclaimed righteous officials. They were either honest officials or they had been officials for too short a time and couldn't gather much money. However, they were jealous, so they all sent memorials to Seng Qian to protect them. When these memorials were sent to Zhu Qijin, they were all ignored. The emperor didn't care. Did the people who did things have to be reported? Just like eunuch Mao Mu, weren't there just as many people who reported him? Not to mention, Zhu Qijin was very conceited. He thought that he understood Qian Sung Bao and didn't have the guts to steal so much money. If it was 100 or 2,000 taels of silver, he might still dare to do it. However, it was a few million taels of silver. He didn't have the guts. This was Zhu Qijin's biggest shortcoming. He always liked to be self-righteous. He always thought that he understood everything. He always thought that he was very good at judging people. Wang Zhen was like this before, Qian Seng Bao was like this now, and Mao Mu would also be like this in the future. It was no wonder he lost everything in the end. Mao Mu quietly watched Qian Seng Bao's performance from the side. He also did his best to complete the orders given to him by the other party. He didn't touch any of the names sent by the other party, even though he didn't see a single copper coin of the money sent by these officials. The only thing he did was to memorize the names of these officials and send people to investigate how much money those officials sent to Qian Seng Bao. He also wanted to know in his heart how much money those officials sent to Qian Seng Bao. His thoughts and desires were far greater than Qian Seng Bao's. Qian Seng Bao didn't feel any discomfort with Mao Mu's cooperation. On the contrary, he thought that everything should be done. Just think about it. Even Kai Zhong, such a favored eunuch, was he not also defeated by him? Qian Seng Bao arrogantly thought that Kai Zhong's fall was because of him. Besides, wasn't Mao Mu able to become the head of the embroidered uniform guard today with his help? Chapter 16, 75. Since he could help the other party, he could also pull the other party down. Listening to his orders now was a sign of intelligence. With this kind of arrogance, Qian Seng Bao walked further and further down the wrong path. Later, when he sent the name list, he was too lazy to see Mao Mu. Instead, he sent the eunuch beside him to do it. At the same time, he was also preparing to find someone to replace Kai Zhong's position. One day, when the opportunity was right, he was even preparing to find someone to replace Mao Mu's position. No matter how obedient Mao Mu was, it was not as good as someone he personally trained. He felt more at ease doing things. Soon, a eunuch named Songda and Zhang Qin entered Qian Sengbao's sight. These two people were good at talking. Every day, they flattered Qian Sengbao like dogs, saying things that made people feel comfortable. In addition to Qian Sengbao's nephew, Qian Liang, the three of them became Qian Sengbao's right-hand men. Under Qian Sengbao's arrangement, the two eunuchs entered the Imperial Horse Directorate and prepared to use their methods to compete for the position of chief eunuch. Qian Liang found his uncle. He wanted to be the commander of the embroidered uniform guard. Qian Liang was a real man, unlike eunuchs. Naturally, there were not many people who could adapt to his position. In comparison, the rank of commander of the embroidered uniform guard was suitable and had great power. The position was impressive enough. Naturally, it was his first choice. This was not the first time Qian Liang had asked for it. In the past, Qian Sengbao had refused, saying that he needed to train. In fact, he wanted to earn money. According to his discussion with Mao Mu, the position of commander was worth 500,000 taels of silver. This did not include the monthly filial piety. But now, with so many officials giving him gifts, he didn't lack this small amount of money. He immediately agreed to his nephew's request. First, when he was serving Zhu Qijin, he revealed how capable his nephew was. With the imperial favor and trust, Qian Liang became the commander of the embroidered uniform guard as he wished, a third-rank official. Qian Liang happily took up the position. After he arrived at the embroidered uniform guard, he boasted of being the boss and began to give orders. This immediately attracted the dissatisfaction of Shen Nantang and Wu Ben, who had become the commander of the embroidered uniform guard. This position should have been theirs, but now it was given to an outsider. The grievance, they felt, was unspeakable, but it didn't mean that they couldn't do anything. For example, it was still possible for them to unite with their brothers and not cooperate with Qian Liang's work. No wonder they were brought up by Mao Mu. Both Shen Nantang and Wu Ben were generous people. They usually took care of their brothers in every possible way. If any brother's family was in trouble, they would help if they could and take money if they could. After all, as long as they followed Mao Mu, they would never be short of money. They could also intercept a lot of gray income and only needed to report it to Mao Mu. Generous and loyal, the brothers under him would naturally submit to him. When Qian Liang found that no one was listening to him after working for a whole day and everyone was patronizing him, he got angry. No matter what, he was still Qian Sengbao's nephew. He was taught by Qian Sengbao, so he still had some ability. At that moment, he thought of the method his uncle taught him. He wanted to rope in a group of people by himself to achieve the goal of fighting for the right to speak. However, the greedy Qian Liang was unwilling to spend money. When facing some of the embroidered uniform guard brothers who were on the sidelines and didn't have much ability, even if he went out to eat with them, they still had to pay. Gradually, after everyone knew Qian Liang's nature, in just a few days, everyone stopped paying attention to this commander. When you didn't get anything in return, who did you think you were a fool? Qian Liang found that the brothers around him were getting fewer and fewer. When he was about to become a commander without an army, he finally felt powerless. He had no choice but to ask his uncle, Qian Sengbao, for help. Soon, Mao Mu received a message from a little eunuch sent by Qian Sengbao asking to see him. In this period of time, Mao Mu had also cultivated a lot of trusted eunuchs. Among them, the most outstanding one was the eunuch called Zhu Tao. Under Mao Mu's intention, he was promoted to the position of deputy chief eunuch in the Empress Palace. Usually, when he wasn't here, it was Zhu Tao who took care of all kinds of things. Godfather, Eunuch Qian didn't come with good intentions. Zhu Tao's face was full of worry. When the little eunuch came to deliver the message, he happened to be present. Because of Mao Mu's trust, he also knew that Qian Liang had hit a wall in the embroidered uniform guard. Regarding this, Zhu Tao had always been worried. He meant to worship Qian Liang like a bodhisattva. No matter what, he was still eunuch Qian Sengbao's nephew. This kind of superficial work still had to be done. If it was in the past, Mao Mu could only do this. However, now that Kaizhong had fallen from power, Chao Jisheng's power had been uprooted, and only Qian Sengbao was left. He really wasn't afraid of anything. At worst, everyone would fight. Speaking of which, he had a lot of evidence in his hands. Once he took it out, he was afraid that Qian Sengbao wouldn't be able to bear the consequences. That's right, little Taozi. You're right. This time, I'm afraid eunuch Qian will come to make things difficult for this eunuch. Mao Mu nodded. He agreed with this point of view, but he wasn't afraid. This was because taking down Qian Sengbao was originally one of his goals. Only in this way could he truly control the eunuch group. Only then could he reach the left and right harem and even part of the imperial court's power when Yang Xie launched an attack. In order to achieve this goal, Qian Sengbao must fall. With a goal, he had to do it. Mao Mu had been preparing for this. But at the same time, he was also very clear that after all, he had followed Zhu Qijin for so many years and was called a companion. It wasn't so easy to take down Qian Sengbao. If he didn't do it well, he would be in trouble if he couldn't take down the other party. Therefore, he needed a bigger opportunity. Just last night, the group that contacted him had already sent the opportunity to him. The next problem was how to implement it. Now that Qian Sengbao asked him to go over, it was the right time to throw out the bait. He got up and walked calmly in the direction of Qinjiang Hall. Along the way, Mao Mu had already thought about how to face Qian Xingbao and how to answer when questioned. As expected, in the room where Qian Xingbao was resting, Qian Liang was standing beside him. When Mao Mu walked in, Qian Liang immediately had an arrogant look and didn't even look him in the eye. Mao Mu was like an old monk in meditation. He didn't have any reaction to all this. But when he came in front of Qian Xingbao, he bowed respectfully and looked like he was waiting for the emperor's orders. After all, Mao Mu was now the director of the genie guards and was an acquaintance of the emperor and empress. Qian Xingbao couldn't be too arrogant, so he first squeezed out a smile and then said with a smile, "Eunuch Mao, you're here. Have a seat." "I don't dare. In front of Eunuch Qian, how can I have a place?" Mao Mu replied very low-key. Ha! Qian Xingbao was very impressed with Mao Mu's attitude. Mao Mu was the kind of person who was very obedient. Basically, he would do whatever Qian Xingbao asked him to do. Not only that, but he was also very respectful every time they met. If it wasn't for the matter of his nephew, Qian Liang, he wouldn't be able to find any fault with him. It was precisely because Mao Mu had always been too low-key that Qian Xingbao was very unhappy when a problem arose. In his opinion, Mao Mu was clearly looking down on Qian Liang. That was equivalent to looking down on him. He really needed to give Mao Mu a beating. In Qian Xingbao's eyes, Mao Mu could be where he was today because of his recommendation. Otherwise, Mao Mu would only be a chief eunuch in the emperor's palace who didn't have much power. He was used to being complimented and couldn't stand the slightest bit of grievance. Qian Xingbao was such a person. So when Mao Mu stood firm, he expressed his displeasure. "Eunuch Mao, this duke wants to ask, who exactly does the embroidered uniform guard listen to now? Is it still the embroidered uniform guard under the emperor's command? Why is it that the embroidered uniform guard doesn't listen to the words of the emperor's personal commander? As the director of their factory, shouldn't you say something?" He was denouncing Mao Mu. Although he had already expected all of this, Mao Mu still pretended to be in fear and trepidation. His face was full of shock. "How is this possible? Such a thing can't happen, right?" "It won't. Qian Liang, come and talk to Eunuch Mao." Qian Xingbao looked like he didn't want to argue with Mao Mu. At this time, he had already begun to consider whether he should arrange for someone else to manage the genie guards and remove Mao Mu. When it was Qian Liang's turn to speak, he talked endlessly about what happened after he went to the genie guards. He added oil and vinegar. Qian Liang didn't have any other skills, but his eloquence was quite good. After he said this, it really seemed like he had suffered a great grievance. Qian Xingbao, who was listening at the side, was very angry. Even Mao Mu had an indignant look on his face as he roared, These people are too outrageous. They should all be captured and killed." Qian Xingbao and Qian Liang were dumbfounded by Mao Mu's roar. They didn't expect Mao Mu to have such a reaction. Shouldn't he be looking for reasons and making excuses? Why did he suddenly seem to be more angry than them? As for what he said, killing all the genie guards, this was something Qian Xingbao and Qian Liang didn't want to do. If they really killed them, who would do the work? Oh, the genie guards were doing well before. Now that Qian Liang was the commander, their work suddenly stopped. What would the emperor think? Even if he used his toes to think, he would know what was going on. We must kill them all. Since they don't respect the commander like this, killing them is not wrong. Eunuch Qian, I ask for an imperial edict to punish all the current genie guards. If it doesn't work, we'll kill more than half of them. This way, we'll see who dares to not listen to the commander's orders. Mao Mu didn't seem to be joking. Since he was going to ask for an imperial edict, he was serious. Chapter 1676. Of course, Qian Xingbao wouldn't agree, although he was very angry that the embroidered uniform guards didn't obey his nephew's orders. But if he had to kill them all because of this, he would not do such a thing. Therefore, The person who should be condemning him became the one who comforted him. Ayaya, Eunuch Mao, calm down, calm down. You can't do things like this. How can you fight and kill for no reason? Yes, I was too agitated. It's just that I really don't know about this matter. I've been taking care of the Empress for a while and haven't been to the Brocade Guards Yamen. If you don't believe me, Commander Qian, think about it carefully. Have you seen me in the past few days? Mao Mu knew that he had the upper hand, so he stopped and asked Qian Liang. Qian Liang thought about it carefully and found that it was true. He immediately replied, "That's right. I haven't seen Eunuch Qian in the embroidered uniform guard these few days." "That's right. It's all a misunderstanding. However, it doesn't matter. I'll go to the embroidered uniform guard and gather those brats. I'll give them a good lecture and have Commander Qian give them a good lecture. What do you think, Eunuch Qian?" Mao Mu seemed to be speaking in a submissive tone. What could Qian Xingbao say when he had such a proper attitude? He could only nod and say, "Since it's a misunderstanding, I've wronged Eunuch Mao. Then we'll do as you say. Thank you for your understanding, Eunuch Qian." Mao Mu's body straightened at this moment. The atmosphere eased up a lot, and the three people all had smiles on their faces. Since the atmosphere eased, there was no need to be so serious. Mao Mu said, "Eunuch Qian, Commander Qian, it's not difficult to deal with these embroidered uniform guards. You can do it from two aspects. The first is to give them money. With benefits, everyone will be willing to follow you." As he spoke, Mao Mu was still observing Qian Xingbao and Qian Liang's reactions. Just as he thought, both of them had a serious look on their faces after listening to him. Obviously, for misers like them, it was more appropriate for others to give them money. Asking them to take out their money and hand it over to their subordinates was even more unbearable than killing them. Mao Mu then continued, "If we don't give them money, then we can only take the second path, which is to display enough ability to intimidate them. Coincidentally, there is a matter that His Majesty has instructed me to discuss the issue of grain with Yang Xie. If this matter is done well, this merit will be enough to intimidate others, and we won't have to worry about the brocade guards not being obedient." Listening to Mao Mu's words, Qian Liang originally wanted to say that his ability was mediocre. It was too difficult to prove to others with his ability. But before he could say anything, he heard about the problem of food. He couldn't help but open his ears wide. At this moment, Qian Sengbao's expression turned serious. His intuition told him that this matter of food could be done. After all, it was part of the procurement process. As long as one was a eunuch in the palace or an official in the imperial court, who wouldn't know that when it came to procurement, there were always benefits to be gained. "Eunuch Mao, what exactly is going on? Tell me about it." Qian Xingbao took this to heart. When he asked about Mao Mu, his attitude became much more amiable. Mao Mu, who had been waiting for the sentence, explained the task that His Majesty had instructed him to do in detail. It turned out that ever since Yang Xie was assassinated in the capital and the imperial edict in Chao Jishang's hands, although Yang Xie didn't declare war on the Southern Ming Empire, he had been preparing for it. It was said that there were many official ships that went from Qiqin City to Laizhou Prefecture every day, transporting all kinds of supplies before the war. Of course, the Southern Ming Empire wasn't idle either. The Ministry of War began to deploy troops, and the Ministry of Revenue began to prepare money and food. Here came the problem. In the past few years, because Yang Xie had poured large amounts of food into the Southern Ming Empire, and the price was very reasonable, it heavily suppressed the local food industry. As a result, the more land the farmers planted, the more losses they suffered. Gradually, large amounts of land began to become barren, and the Southern Ming Empire no longer had the ability to produce their own food. Now that they were about to go to war with Yang Xie naturally didn't want to sell food to the Southern Ming Empire. Although in the past 2 years, the officials of the Southern Ming Empire had seen through the problem and increased the amount of food they bought, and they had accumulated some food. However, if they only sent out and didn't receive any food, they wouldn't be able to last for long. For the southern Ming Empire that was about to go to war, this was an extremely dangerous matter. The emperor saw the problem and handed the matter to the embroidered uniform guards, telling them to discuss with the officials of Yangtze about the matter of purchasing food. After all, the two sides hadn't declared war yet, right? Moreover, in the previous negotiations, it was agreed that the southern Ming Empire could continue to buy food, but the price would be raised by 30%. A 30% price increase was still acceptable to the southern Ming Empire. What they were afraid of was that the Yangtze wouldn't sell food. That would be the worst-case scenario. Regarding this matter, we also sent people to discuss with the officials of Yangtze. The other party also revealed a certain amount of information. It's not that they don't want to sell food. After all, the Yangtze boasted that they wanted to bring the Han people to the peak of the world. The southern Ming Empire is full of Han people, and they can't just watch the people starve to death. However, they still want to raise the price. This is something that the emperor can't accept. Our embroidered uniform guards are responsible for buying food at a 30% price increase to prepare for war. Mao Mu said a lot in one breath. After he finished speaking, he closed his mouth and looked at Qian Xingbao and his nephew's performance. The matter was already very clear, and Qian Xingbao was also thinking in his heart. If this was the case, this was indeed a good job. Once he could buy a lot of food, the emperor would definitely be happy. Then he would be able to obtain merit. However, the problem was that it wasn't easy to talk about the price of food. Thus, he asked the crucial question, Eunuch Mao, does the emperor mean that there's a possibility of the price increasing? The emperor naturally hopes that it will be as low as possible. However, the food is now in the hands of others. Of course, it's not up to us to decide. If it must increase, then we can only accept it. Mao Mu spread out his hands, and there was a hint of helplessness on his face. This meant that there was room for fluctuation. This way, not only could this task be completed, there might even be a lot of profit in the process. Qian Sengbao's eyes lit up. He had already decided to accept this task for his nephew. When he looked at Mao Mu, he didn't blame him at all. Not only that, his eyes were filled with admiration. It seemed that he had really wronged him before. If Mao Mu really didn't want Qian Liang to be the commander, then why would he mention such an important task? When he thought about how he had wronged him, a trace of guilt flashed across Qian Sengbao's face. He then said, Eunuch Mao, it was indeed a misunderstanding. I have wronged you. How about this? Qian Liang will accept this task. When you return, please hand over the relevant matters. What do you think? Everything will be done according to Eunuch Qian's wishes. Mao Mu pretended to hesitate for a moment, then agreed. As for whether the other party would gain merit, because of this, this was originally a trap. Qian Liang was willing to fall into it, so he couldn't blame others. Mao Mu was politely sent away. Qian Xingbao and his nephew, Qian Liang, went into a secret meeting. Because of the big trouble, Qian Xingbao even called the eunuch Songda to help Qian Liang. After that, he repeatedly reminded Song that the matter must be done well so that he could show his face in front of the emperor. After Qian Liang received a good task, he was naturally very excited. Soon, he brought Songda out of the palace and went straight to Yang Xie's office in the capital. In the office, a young official, Wang Tongsheng, who was only 24 years old, was already waiting for Qian Liang to visit. Wang Tongsheng, a student of the 6th batch of Yangtze Academy in Crimson City. When he graduated, he was ranked first in all aspects and caught the eye of Yang Qindong. First, he was sent to the city lord's mansion and started from a small position. His workability was once recognized by city Lord Yu Qian. After that, he was trained by Yang Qindong. This time, he was sent to southern Ming to cooperate with Mao Mu to seize power. As a student of the Yang Family Academy, there was no need to talk about their ability. More importantly, they were loyal to their leader, Yang Qindong. In the eyes of these students, without Yang Qindong, they wouldn't have everything they had now. In addition, in ancient times, students were very respectful to their teachers. If anyone dared to violate them, they would not be tolerated by this society. This kind of student was naturally worthy of trust. Wang Tongsheng was a person who was trusted. Before he came, Yang Qindong specially called him over to give him some instructions. He was very clear about the task this time. Therefore, when he heard that someone in the office reported that the commander of the Southern Ming Brocade Guards, Qianliang, had come to visit, a smile flashed across his face. The fish had taken the bait. Not only Qianliang, but many well-informed people from the Southern Ming Empire also knew of Yang Shi's strength. Unknowingly, they had developed the thought of being inferior to him. Therefore, as soon as he entered the office, Qianliang put away his arrogance and became cautious. He even smiled at everyone he met. For someone like Qianliang, if he was born during the anti-Japanese war, he would be a complete traitor. After being led to a room, Qianliang saw Wang Tongsheng. However, it was different from what he imagined. Wang Tongsheng immediately asked greedily, "Commander Qian, right? Such an important position must be very rich. This is the first time we meet. Do you have any greeting gift?" Qianliang had never experienced such a thing. The moment they met, they immediately asked for money. Even the most savage and unscrupulous group of eunuchs in his eyes didn't seem to do things so blatantly. For a moment he was stunned. Qianliang didn't respond. Wang Tongsheng was very angry. He waved his hand and said, "Since you didn't prepare a greeting gift, you can go back. This official is tired today. We can talk about the food another day." You're tuning in to the Thunder Spear YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.